Chapter 111. The reason she is here too. By the time Seol Jihu got hold of himself, Kim Hana and Jang Maldong were talking merrily. Sometimes I even wake up at night, worrying if he's eating or wearing clothes properly. I understand. Participating in the rescue mission without telling you was that brat's fault, 100%. It's the same with the banquet. He can go after he gains more experience and strength. It hasn't even been a year since he entered paradise, yet he's always dying to go to places filled with life-threatening danger. Am I worrying about him too much? Of course not. He is your contract partner. I agree with you fully. But, as someone who's instructed him for the past month, there's something I'd like to say. Oh, Kim Hana shrunk back a bit, cosplaying as a surprised, innocent girl when she was really a sly fox. You instructed him personally, Master Jang. Then could you have been at the huge stone rocky mountain? You knew, so that's why his face was. Ah, of course I do. It's the home mountain of high rankers. Haha, home mountain is it. That's very flattering. No, I'm being serious. Kim Hana smiled modestly. Seol Jihu followed his instincts and brought a paper bag up to his mouth. While the youth barfed quietly in the background, Jang Maldong convinced her with a calm voice. When he told her his initial plan of making him an archer who would support the team from the back and have him leave during Stage 2, Kim Hana nodded her head in agreement. But this brat stubbornly refused to take on the role of an archer. He said he wanted to be a warrior no matter what. Oh my, so you just let him be? I was angry at first, so I took him to the huge stone rocky mountain under two conditions. I told him I'd kick him out of the team if he couldn't keep up with my training, and even if he passed, I said he would be banned from participating in the banquet if he didn't meet my expectations. Kim Hana narrowed her eyes and glanced to the side. She saw Seol Jihu with his face shoved into a paper bag filled with vomit. He actually threw up. That bastard. Kim Hana was just about to grit her teeth but quickly went back to managing her expression. I wanted to teach him a lesson, but I actually ended up taking a blow. He kept up like a madman with an unwavering spirit. A contemplating look flashed on Kim Hana's face. Jang Maldong cleared his throat. This old man's talked too much. Sorry for bothering you. He maintained a polite and courteous tone the entire time. He might be a tiger during training sessions, but he always maintained a level of respect with those he wasn't familiar with. And no, not at all. Kim Hana didn't know what to do when an old man dozens of years older than her treated her with such respect. Seol Jihu studied Jang Maldong carefully, and it didn't seem like he was lying even a tiny bit. Soon, Jang Maldong tapped on Seol Jihu's shoulders before walking out of the door. Phew. Kim Hana exhaled as if the meeting just now took 10 years off her life. Seol Jihu stared fixedly into the crystal. I guess I don't have a choice. He's not someone who would say something like that without a reason. You can go. Just be careful. Okay, she gave her consent, but when the youth continued to stare at her, her neck flushed red. Don't stare at me so much. He's my grandfather's age. Plus, it's not like I'm always irritated and itching for an argument. Right. Seol Jihu responded with a wry smile, but throwing up wasn't called for. Kim Hana revealed a bitter smile and then loosened the buttons around her collars. Anyways, thanks. For what? Miss Seo Yuhui and now Master Jang. I got to meet two of Paradise's legends, thanks to you. You never know what new connections someone might bring, huh? Is that something to thank me for? Of course. There's a huge difference between being complete strangers and being strangers who have talked with each other once or twice. Since she put it that way, it did seem to be the case. Seol Jihu regained his calm and smiled. If you're grateful, then buy me dinner. Dinner? Lunch works too. You see, I'll be dropping by Scheherazade tomorrow. Why? I need to buy new equipment. I hear Scheherazade has the best quality goods and they also have the biggest auction house. That's true, but... wait, you said you're a level 3 now, right? When Seol Jihu replied yes, Kim Hana rolled her eyes as if she was mulling over an important matter. Soon, she murmured, I guess it's okay, before opening her mouth. Fine. I benefited thanks to you, and it can also serve as a celebration. I'll be generous. Stay there and wait. Stay here. When Seol Jihu asked for a clarification, Kim Hana winked. You'll find out in 2 days, 2 days later. While Seol Jihu was busy reading a book he had borrowed from the library about the banquet, a package arrived in Karp Deem's office. The sender was Kim Hannah, and once Seol Jihu confirmed the contents of the package, he jumped in surprise. He could see parts of an armor stacked on top of each other. The first thing to catch his attention was a brigandine with a golden lining. It came with a gorget to protect his neck and a cuirass to protect his chest. The design of the armor boasted an easy assembly, and he could tell from it that it was made to be comfortable. He also saw a small chainmail to wear underneath. It was a bit longer than the one he had bought in the neutral zone, and the chains were made out of an unknown white metal rather than steel. That wasn't all. There was also a high-quality ivory-colored leather jacket, reddish-brown leather pants, and brown boots with strings. After seeing the 5 items, Seol Jihu dropped his jaw in astonishment. Although he wasn't knowledgeable about equipment, he could tell even at a glance that these items were worth well over dozens of silver coins. The chainmail and the brigandine looked especially extraordinary. He guessed they must be at least several hundred silver coins. She didn't need to go this far. He might have been thinking so, but he was already putting them on with a happy smile on his face. Since he got high-quality equipment without spending a single silver coin, how could he not be ecstatic, of course? He didn't forget to call her to say thanks. 4 days before the spawn of the banquet's entrances, Kazuki visited the office. "I'm terribly sorry." There was only one reason Kazuki would be apologizing. He had to have failed in recruiting a priest. The existence of a priest was a life-or-death factor in an expedition. Since the banquet was especially volatile and unpredictable, having a healing priest was an absolute must. The fact that they hadn't been able to find a priest meant that they needed to reconsider participating in the banquet. "Looks like Tsuji Yuki is serious about this," Jang Maldong mumbled. Kazuki neither denied nor confirmed the statement, but his stiff face was laced with cold rage. "I hit up my contacts in Haramark as well as other cities, but—" Kazuki was angry to the point that he couldn't even finish his sentence. Unsurprisingly, an archer of Kazuki's caliber had many connections. It didn't make any sense for him to not know a priest or two. If he couldn't find anyone despite this. Other cities too? Yes. Almost as if they matched words beforehand, all of them told me that they were joining another team. Then it only made sense to believe that the Japan Business Federation had obstructed them. Ha. Jang Maldong shook his head with a sigh. It was unfortunate, but it was the unwritten rule of paradise to not interfere in internal feuds. The Japan Business Federation was likely unhappy with Karp Deem for forming a team with Kazuki. In any case, they were left with 2 choices: to give up on the banquet or to have Karp Deem find a priest. The Japan Business Federation had no justification to interfere in Karp Deem's activities. But the problem was that neither Hugo nor Chohong had any connections with a priest. Jang Maldong had retired from Paradise in the past, so he didn't want to involve himself in outside problems. Of course, he could find someone if he really wanted to, but he wasn't sure what the other party would request from him. In the end, everyone's gaze fell on one person. Seol. Hugo carefully opened his mouth. "Can you ask Maria Yeriel?" When Kazuki asked back, Hugo nodded his head. Seol recruited her personally for the mission in Ramen Village. "I'm fine if it's her. She's kind and skilled." Jang Maldong nodded his head in agreement. Kazuki's eyes also gleamed. "Seol, please, I'm ready to clutch at straws." "Maria is kind." Seol Jihu tilted his head before making a troubled expression. "It's not hard to ask her, but—" He blurred the end of his sentence and then shook his head. "I doubt she'll agree." In the previous mission, she had gone through life-threatening danger and lost her precious artifact. The image of Maria crying and declaring she would never follow him again was still vivid in his mind. Kazuki continued, as if that didn't matter. "I'm not suggesting that you're our only hope. I have something I could try out, but I'd still like you to try just in case." Just trying wasn't difficult. He was merely hesitant because he knew how Maria would react. Of course, he knew he wasn't in a position to just sit back and do nothing, so he reluctantly agreed. "What's your other plan?" Hearing Chohong's question, Kazuki looked out the window. "I'll go see her." "Who?" "Ah." Chohong immediately thought of someone. Well, since she raised you, she at least won't ignore you. It was only for a short time, but she helped me greatly. Kazuki looked unwilling, but in an anxious kind of way. I'll explain our circumstance to her and ask for help. It might be shameless of me to do so, but we're in no position to be picky. Kazuki took out a crystal ball from his pocket. Tell me how it goes with Maria Sial. Yes, I'll let you know right away. Sial Jihu got up from his seat and took the crystal. Same time, different place. Achoo! Maria sneezed loudly in her temple room. Fucking hell! Why is it so cold? She sniffled as she held her body close at the sudden chilliness. Sial Jihu went to the Temple of Luxuria and visited Maria. I refuse. Meeting her wasn't hard, but neither was her answer. Because I, Maria, care more about my life than money. What's money worth if you die and can't use it, right? She put her hands on her hips and declared commandingly. Sial Jihu reined in his desire to poke her baby-fat puffed cheeks and opened his mouth. Miss Maria. Shut up. Leave before I call someone. Shoo. Maria shooed him away as if she wanted nothing more to do with him. Of course, Sial Jihu didn't come without a plan. He had brought the crucifix artifact he'd gotten from the royal family's storage to use as bait. However, an unexpected problem came up. The same crucifix artifact was hanging on Maria's neck. It seemed that she somehow found an identical one. Seeing that Sial Jihu had no plans to leave, Maria dropped her head. Well, I acknowledge that your team is very strong. Since two of the best teams in Haramark joined hands, it really can't be anything but strong. Then why? Do you even need to ask? The Japan Business Federation. The Triads. I hate getting involved in complicated relationships. I'm more than happy to watch a fire burn from the other side of the river, but I would never jump in myself. Sial Jihu didn't know what to say since she was being so adamant. I guess I don't have any other choice. In the end, he decided to give up on persuading her. The Maria he knew was a priest who moved solely based on profit. It seemed he needed to change his strategy. Sial Jihu put his hand into his pocket. Anyways, that's enough from you. Clang, the sound of clashing metallic objects rang out. Maria paused and glanced up. When she saw Sial Jihu placing a pouch on the table, she smirked. Wow, Tilda, you're funny. Fine, I'll take a look since you insist. She opened the pouch slightly and one corner of her mouth twisted up. 10 silver coins. You're kidding, right? She tilted her head up and crossed her arms and legs. I followed you to Ramen Village for 15 silver coins, though I ended up getting tricked. Anyways, this is not even close to get me to follow you to the... Clang. Before she could even finish her speech, a second pouch was placed on the table. Maria narrowed her eyes. 20. Ha, just leave while I'm still being nice. Clang, you know. Here's some vodka. Drink this and get your mind working straight. I'm not trying to bargain with you. I really don't want to. Clang, 40 silver coins. Maria bit her cherry-like lips. Clang. Another attack came in. Maria lifted her butt halfway before quickly putting it back down. She pressed down on her temples and groaned. Cuke. If only I didn't blow all my money to get this artifact. Ah, and no, don't be tempted. She took several breaths before resolving herself with firm determination. It's obvious how this will play out. I'm going to end up rolling in the mud again. I'd be a fool if I got tricked a second time. Seeing Maria's eyes tremble, Sial Jihu snorted and threw another pouch. Clang. Maria screamed in shock. Stop, what are you doing? Are you crazy? How can you spend dozens of silver coins to hire a priest who's not even a high ranker? Clang, why, you devil? You're a devil. Do what you want. You think I'll give in with just this? Clang. Ah. Maria yelped before shooting up with an angry look. Then, Appa Tilda, she scurried up close and grabbed all 8 pouches before holding them close in her embrace. How can you throw money like this? Poor babies. From an unwelcome guest to a devil, then from a devil to an Appa, all it took was 80 silver coins. I'm looking forward to working with you. HMPH, I hate you, Appa. She even began to talk with a nasally voice. Sial Jihu happily watched the crazed Maria rubbing her cheeks on the pouches. Money is nice. Huh. Although he had to use 80 silver coins, he hardly considered it a loss. He had well over 900 silver coins and even had many priceless items like a piece of gold and the proof of castitas. Plus, he ended up saving the crucifix. After successfully recruiting Maria, Xiao Jihu left the temple and took out the communication crystal he got from Kazuki. Xiao, Mr. Kazuki. As soon as he picked up, Xiao Jihu drew a V sign with his hands. I recruited her. I recruited someone. The youth and the man both wore dazed expressions. Chapter 112. The banquet has already started. The history of the banquet dates back to the time when a mysterious passenger ship was found at the Mariposa Sea near the city of Nur. The first eyewitness, José Sanchez, Spain, described the moment as follows. It was early dawn. I was looking out from the port of Nur at the serene sea when I suddenly felt a huge shadow creep up. The night fog blurred my vision, so I couldn't make out its size, but I could tell that its size far surpassed a normal passenger ship. It swayed in the sea for about 2 minutes before vanishing into thin air. The mysterious ship attracted an unusual level of attention, and Earthlings flocked to the port of Nur to solve the mystery. However, the ship didn't appear again, and the Earthlings disbanded, thinking it was just a simple incident. Just like that, the incident seemed to have come to a conclusion. But 8 days later, an Earthling appeared, claiming to have seen a mysterious ship at the Libera Lake near the city of Eva. Mays, China. Account corroborated José Sanchez's story, but it didn't attract much attention due to the following 2 reasons. 1. Nur and Eva were cities on opposite ends of the map, and it was impossible to cross the distance in 8 days even by sea. 2. More importantly, Mariposa and Libera weren't connected bodies of water. However, 6 days later, an incident arose that took public opinion by a storm. A third account of the same incident came out of Haramark's Raman River. Xiao Jihu took his eyes off the paper and took a short break. His eyes were starting to get tired, but he also needed some time to organize his thoughts. The records showed that the appearances of mysterious ghost ships signaled the start of the banquet. After appearing and vanishing in the waters of the 7 kingdoms for 2 months, entrances would appear all over paradise. Then where did these entrances lead to? And why were Earthlings so enthusiastic about the banquet? Unquenchable curiosity compelled Xiao Jihu to turn his gaze to the records. The entrances all share a few characteristics. 1. They come in all colors and forms. 2. Once 10 people enter, they lose the ability to admit more people. 3. Once created, they reappear in the same spot every 2 years. 4. People who enter are moved to an unknown place that is different every time. An unknown place. This particular phrase caught Xiao Jihu's attention, but remembering the transfer magic circles used in the rescue mission, he guessed that the entrances had a similar mechanism. So that's why the banquet is unpredictable. The 4th characteristic gave a clue as to why the banquet was unpredictable. The overall structure might be the same every time, but since the place and the detailed contents of the banquet changed every time, it made sense why there was no clear way to prepare for the banquet. The banquet was separated into 3 stages. Although finding the entrances were once considered a separate stage these days, it didn't have much meaning because several organizations noticed the 3rd rule during the 2nd banquet and had secured over 80% of the entrances. In any case, after moving to the unknown place, the participants had to go through Stage 1 and Stage 2. The goal for these 2 stages was to safely arrive at a designated location. In Stage 2, participants could receive an item called the Dissonant Wish, and the ultimate goal of this stage was to board a ship. To summarize, Stage 1 and Stage 2 were battles of wits with cooperation as the overarching theme. If the participants worked together, although it would take them more time, they would be able to obtain equal rewards. However, it was hard to expect people to cooperate in a situation where selfishness was encouraged. This was surmised to be the reason for the catastrophe that had erupted during the 4th banquet. As for Stage 3, it was unfortunately wrapped in a veil of mystery. Unlike Stage 1 and Stage 2, the requirement for entering Stage 3 changed every time, and almost nothing was known about the goal or the content of this stage. That was because the survivors of Stage 3 refused to talk about it. To be precise, they were prohibited from talking about it due to an oath. However, one survivor explained, That place wasn't a ghost ship, but a treasure ship. From this, people guessed that Stage 3 was inside the mysterious ship that appeared all over paradise, and that the harmonious wish could be found inside. Dissonant wish and harmonious wish. Sial Jihu mulled over the two phrases. The participants of the banquet had two opportunities to receive rewards. The interesting thing was that these rewards granted the participants' wishes. Of course, absurd wishes like give me the entire world didn't work, but even within a set limit, being able to obtain whatever one desired was incredibly alluring. I see why everyone is so heated up for the banquet. With his interest piqued, Sial Jihu read through the remaining records. As his eyes went down, they became clouded with tension. First banquet Stage 3 survivors, 8/escapees, 2/deaths, 0 special note. One of the survivors, Phil Kanu Cameroon, announces receiving +4 rampaging fierce longsword as Stage 3 reward. Second banquet Stage 3 survivors, 5/escapees, 4/deaths. 1 special note. One of the survivors, Damv Niam Jamaica, advances to level 5 immediately after the banquet. Third banquet Stage 3 survivors, 1/escapees, 1/deaths. 8 special note. The sole survivor, Bikhiju Korea, kills everyone other than the sole escapee. She declared, Stage 3 wasn't a cooperative mission but a battle royale. Fourth banquet Stage 3 survivors, 0/escapees, 0/deaths. 10 special note. During Stage 2, a catastrophe occurs in which participants kill each other unconditionally. Nothing about Stage 3 has been confirmed, but seeing that no one made it back, it is estimated that there are no survivors. Sial Jihu fell in thought. That catastrophic incident only occurred once. And besides, this one is a special banquet. What about the Haramark royal family? I heard that they plan to ban Earthlings from participating in the banquet after that incident. It's been cancelled. The recent high death count among high rankers seems to have affected their decision. If you look at the distribution of participants, a vast majority of them are level 4s. Almost everyone who is remotely decent will flock to this event. Remembering the words he didn't understand back then, a corner of his heart turned cold. He didn't expect the banquet to be easy, but the huge drop in the survival rate after the third banquet was something he couldn't gloss over. But why? After thinking about the matter for a long time, Sial Jihu's curiosity suddenly approached the root of the problem. This banquet. Who, what, when, where, why, how? Without a doubt, every Earthling who knew about the banquet would have speculated about the same thing. But no one had a clear answer, with only theories and conjectures being known. Even Sial Jihu, who had solved one of Haramark's great mysteries, could not think of anything brilliant. Whatever, Sial Jihu organized the records and lied down on his bed. 2 days before the departure, Kazuki held a simple briefing. A detailed strategy couldn't be formed until the start of the banquet, but the team wanted to at least make some preparations. They also needed to learn each other's faces. As such, a total of 8 people gathered together. Among them, 7 would be participating in the banquet. On Carp Diem's side were Sial Jihu, Hugo, Chohong, and the priest Sial Jihu invited, Maria. On Yumi Tsubame's side were Ainz Kazuki and Osu, a 170-centimeter-tall man whose hair was dyed red and puffed up like a lion's mane. My name is Sakamoto Jun. The man introduced himself energetically before grabbing Sial Jihu's hands and vigorously shaking them up and down. Sial Jihu was taken aback. Translucent sunglasses, a casual Hawaiian shirt, wrinkly shorts, and sandals. How could he put it? He felt like the man's attitude and clothes gave off the aura of a free spirit. Hello, hello. You're one of the 3 rising stars who have been the talk of paradise, right? The first star warrior who gave up on becoming a magician and even brushed aside Sinyang. The man shoved his face up close before Sial Jihu could say anything. Exchanging glances at a nose-close distance, confusion set in Sial Jihu's face. Behind Sakatamo Jun's black sunglasses, his eyes were gleaming sharply like a wild beast. Hyung Nim, let me tell you something just in case. Huh. I love bulgogi. I like kimchi too. I know most of Korea's famous athletes and I'm a big fan of them. Jun quickly recited with a serious face. When Seol Jihu laughed and replied, me too, his eyes widened and he smiled back cheerfully. Iya tilde. Looks like I'll get along with Hyung Nim. Great, great. Ah, want one. He put his arm over Seol Jihu's shoulders and offered him a cigarette. Hugo, who was watching the exchange, went, me too, me too. It's been a while, Hugo Hyung Nim. I heard you recently got yourself into a rough spot. It's been ages since then. Hey, you got anything other than mild? Just be happy with it. MMM. Jun and Hugo seemed to know each other well. Frankly, given Jun's amiable personality, it wasn't surprising that he would get along with Hugo. Jun puffed out smoke before going, oh shoot, and hitting his forehead. He then offered Cho-hong his pack of cigarettes. I almost forgot about my Chungdan, Chodan, Hongdan, Nunim. Here, want one? Shut up. Oh, and it's been a while, Maria-chan tilde? Shut up. Chet, aren't you too cold-hearted? Is it because you're in front of a celebrity? You're not mad because I tried to be friendly, are you? Jun mumbled like a machine gun. Cho-hong must have found him annoying because she massaged her neck and cut in. Whatever. Anyways, who's that? Cho-hong's chin pointed at the gray-robed person sitting quietly in the corner. The robe was large enough to have room left over after covering their entire body. Because this mysterious person also had the hood pushed down, his or her face wasn't visible. The entire outfit was screaming, I'm a suspicious person? I dunno, Jun replied. What? Didn't you guys invite him or her? We did, but... Jun shrugged his shoulders before turning his gaze. Kazuki, who was standing with his eyes closed and his back against the wall, finally opened his eyes. There's a private circumstance. Kazuki, I didn't know you liked telling jokes. Cho-hong growled with a face that seemed to say, cut the crap. She is an excellent priest, I guarantee it. So it's a she? Anyways, excellent priest or not, you need to introduce her to us since she's going to be our comrade. At least get her to show her face. Seeing the priest not say a word, Cho-hong laughed dumbfoundedly. Oi, quit cosplaying as some dark religious fanatic and take off that hood. Kazuki's eyes narrowed. Chung Cho-hong, watch your mouth. What? Stop there. When Cho-hong shot up from her seat, Jang Maldong restrained her. He wouldn't participate in the banquet, but he was here on the qualification of Carp Diem's advisor. Cho-hong, sit. What? Fucking hell, you're doing this too, old man? I told you to sit. I didn't tell you to not object. Hearing this, Cho-hong plopped down on the couch. Jang Maldong let out a short, dry cough before continuing calmly. Kazuki, I can close my eyes if this team is going on an expedition, but it's a different story if it's the banquet. Kazuki remained in thought. Everyone, including Kazuki, knew Cho-hong was justified in asking the priest to introduce herself. After thinking about the matter for a long time, Kazuki let out a muffled sigh. She was introduced to us by Lady Seo Yuhui. What? I guarantee this priest's identity with my own name. Please understand. There is a complicated circumstance preventing us from revealing her identity. With Kazuki putting it this way, even Cho-hong found it hard to say anything. Fine, it's okay if she doesn't reveal her face, but let us hear her voice. She should be able to tell us her level at the very least, right? The priest seemed to fall in thought. Soon she bowed politely before carefully raising her gloved hand and holding up 5 fingers. Cho-hong stared at this and scowled. Fucking hell, is she for real? Hey, I'm this too. She also held up 5 fingers, provoking the priest. Kazuki pressed his temples and sent Seol Jihu a glance looking for help. Seol Jihu got up, unable to ignore his plea. Chong. What? Wait, what did you call me? When Cho-hong rebutted, Seol Jihu continued nonchalantly. Kazuki went through a lot of trouble to invite her. I know that, so what did you just call me? Let's think positively. It's good to have 2 priests. You think I don't know that, but how am I supposed to entrust my back to her when I don't even know her name? I understand, so calm down. This priest is acting all high and mighty. She won't even let us hear her voice. Arg, whatever, fuck it. Seol Jihu's secret technique, changing the subject repeatedly. Cho-hong had a habit of giving up when a conversation got complicated. This was what Seol Jihu was aiming for. As if the entire conversation was a hassle, she harumphed and buried herself in the couch again. That said, She made it clear that she wouldn't get along with the priest. A few cracks appeared in the team atmosphere just from the first meeting, but Sial Jihu still greeted the priest with a smile. "Nice to meet you, I'm Sial." "Tilt, Sial, that's my name." "Tilt." She tilted her head again. "Can she not understand me?" Sial Jihu tilted his head back, since it looks like we're done with introductions. The awful atmosphere eased slightly when Kazuki opened his mouth. "Let us start." Kazuki looked back at the huge map hanging on the wall. He pointed at a specific location before continuing. "I'll keep it simple. This is the entrance Hao Win handed over." "Question?" At that moment, Jun shouted with his hand up. "Has it been confirmed?" "What do you mean?" "I heard that the Triads acquired 2 entrances, with one being used by the organization and the other being sold to another organization." He was asking this question since it was neither Carp Diem nor Yumi Tsubaim that bought the other entrance. That is only what's known to the public. Kazuki must have expected this question, as he responded without a thought. "There are 26 entrances known to the public, with 21 of them occupied by various forces." "You mean the Triads have entrances kept hidden from the public?" "It's not just the Triads. It's an open secret. Otherwise, there couldn't have been over 300 participants in last banquet." Jun immediately went, "Ah." Since exactly 10 people could enter each entrance, all it took was a simple calculation to know there were more entrances than what were publicly known. The Triads have severe internal conflicts. Naturally, the person who found the new entrance has been keeping it a secret. "Aha, so that's how it is." Jun sat down, seemingly convinced. Kazuki continued the briefing. "We set off tomorrow morning. We'll be traveling by carriage for 2 days using this road." The pen in his hand drew a smooth, curved line. "We'll arrive at the Salt Desert's second oasis. It's not a safe place, but we shouldn't have any trouble with our power." "What is it?" Seeing Sial Jihu raising his hand, Kazuki asked. "What about the Triads?" "If you're asking when they'll be joining us, it will be during Stage 1 or Stage 2 at the latest." "Stage 2? It won't be hard. We'll fight together and support each other if needed. I heard there will be another team helping us as well." "Well, shit, it's a 4-way co-op mission." Cho-hong grumbled as if she was still angry about the previous incident. However, that only lasted a moment, as she soon fell silent. Knowing how the banquet worked, she knew they had nothing to lose by having more teams on their side. "Finally," Kazuki slowly continued, "we'll make a clear identification of friend or foe." Not a single cloud was in the quiet sky, but Carp Diem's office was buzzing with noise from early morning. Because Kazuki had set the departure time considerably early, they had to hurry before it was too late. After putting on his new equipment, Sial Jihu wore the belt carrying javelins and the medicine bottles he got from the hideout. Once he finished readying himself by putting on the robe given by the Federation, he went outside. Sial Jihu looked splendid in his new suit of armor, so much so that Hugo stared at him with a genuine look of envy. Unlike Sial Jihu, Hugo didn't have someone to gift him with a new set of armor. He had to scrape up what little money he had saved up to buy new armor and weapon. Even then, he had to make compromises. Because of this, he was determined to use this banquet as an opportunity to make a fortune. Just before their departure, be careful. "Yes, sir." "With your current abilities, you won't die easily, but that's it. Don't forget that you always have to stay with your team." "I understand." Sial Jihu took Jang Maldong's advice to heart. With that, he headed to the rendezvous location with Cho-hong and Hugo. When Sial Jihu, Cho-hong, and Hugo arrived at the rendezvous location, a bizarre scene was spread out before them. Kazuki had borrowed 2 carriages, yet there were dozens of carriages lined up against the city gate. That wasn't all. What? Even at a glance, he could see hundreds of people waiting nearby. They seemed to be Earthlings judging by their outfits, but the way they were looking at them was not so friendly. "Sial, avoid eye contact and just look forward." Cho-hong whispered into his ears. Sial Jihu also agreed that it was the best thing to do, just as he sped up his pace. Here he found Sakamoto Jun waving his hand from the distance. By the looks of it, Yumi Tsubaim had already arrived. "Now, sorry for rushing you when you just arrived, but we gotta hurry. Hyung Nim and Noonim, ride with me. Maria-chan and Hugo Hyung Nim go on the other carriage. We're splitting up the archers and priests. Makes sense, right? Jun gave a rapid-fire explanation before pushing Seol Jihu and Chohong to the carriage. There was already someone sitting inside the priest Kazuki invited. She was wearing the same style of clothes as when they first met. Hello. Seol Jihu sat on the other side of the carriage and greeted her. The priest cusped her hands together and returned a polite bow. Looks like she's a courteous person. Yes, we've got everyone now. Go on ahead. Jun shouted into a communication crystal before shutting the carriage door. Mr. Coachman, let's go. Clunk, the carriage shook. Soon, the window frames shook as the outside scenery began to travel backward. They closely followed behind Maria, Kazuki, and Hugo's carriage. By the way, you look super cool, Hyung-nim. Seol Jihu was thinking, should I sleep? When he heard the sudden compliment and opened his half-closed eyes, he saw Jun checking him out from head to toe with a look of surprise. One thing that he couldn't understand was that the mysterious priest sitting next to him was also nodding her head in agreement. Thank you for the calm. Do-ju-ju-do. Do-ju-ju-do. Before he could finish saying the word compliment, he was startled by a sudden noise that sounded like a cavalry was galloping forward. When he peeked his head out of the window, just as he expected, the carriages he saw at the city gate were following them. Phew, Tilda, look at all those flies, Tilda, Jun muttered leisurely. What are they doing? I wonder, want me to get off and ask them? I'm kidding, just think about it. There are 5 entrances unoccupied by organizations. That's 50 people. Right. Now the problem is that there are more than 50 individuals or team members who want to enter the banquet. Seol Jihu finally understood what Jun meant. They were probably wrecking their heads trying to think of a method to enter the banquet, and lo and behold, a new entrance has been found. What would you do if you were in their shoes? Especially if you knew only 7 people were entering it. That's 3 empty spots. How can they be sure that we're going to an entrance? Kazuki Hyung-nim would have been disappointed if he heard that. And look, those people aren't idiots. They're taking a chance because at the end of the day, they have the highest chance of entering the banquet this way. Indeed, given Kazuki's fame, it made sense for them to assume he was participating in the banquet. Where else would he lead his team this early in the morning when the banquet was just at the doorstep? Hold on. Seol Jihu was nodding his head when he suddenly arrived at a frightening conclusion. Could they possibly? Hyung-nim, I know what you're thinking. Don't worry. Jun smiled and shook his head. Like I said, those people aren't idiots. Although there are only 7 of us, they know they stand no chance against us. If you say so. We have 3 high rankers, 1 in each common class, so our team's balance is perfect as well. Now that he put it that way, Seol Jihu agreed. The team composition of 2 archers, 2 priests, and 3 warriors were indeed well balanced. Then that many people will compete over just 3 spots. Well, I doubt they'll decide with rock, paper, scissors. Jun giggled as if he found his own joke funny, but seeing that Seol Jihu didn't laugh, he let out a dry cough and once again put on a serious face. Now that I think about it, this is Hyung-nim's first banquet, right? Yes. Then I guess the shock might be too great. Brace yourself. Jun, cut the nonsense. Chohong was listening quietly but chose to cut in here. Nonsense? Noonim, this is valuable advice. Cut the bullshit. You're so mean. Jun dropped his head dejectedly but quickly regained his energy. It's nothing special, but, Hyung-nim, you've been doing well in a good team ever since you entered Paradise. He wasn't wrong. Thanks to his 9 eyes, Seol Jihu was able to choose a good team and distinguish good people. If he didn't have this innate ability, who knew where he might be right now? Don't think all teams are like, don't misunderstand. I'm not trying to belittle Hyung-nim's achievements, but I'm sure they wouldn't have been possible if you didn't have a certain level of trust and faith in your team members. Right, GHT. When Seol Jihu easily acknowledged it, Jun raised both of his hands. That was because Chohong's glaring eyes were getting stronger by the second. Geez, you don't have to be so protective of him. Anyways, as a senpai who participated in the last banquet, let me give you a piece of advice. Jun took a brief pause before saying with a grin, Don't expect too much. Don't expect too much? Seol Jihu immediately asked back. Yep, The more you expect, the more disappointed you will be. On the contrary, if you don't expect anything, you can't be disappointed. What did he mean by that? You'll find out soon enough, but to explain it simply, the moment you go through the entrance, you'll get to meet all sorts of people. His voice became quieter. All I'm saying is that you shouldn't be too disappointed. With humans. With a grin, Jun stopped talking. Don't be disappointed. With humans? It was ambiguous, though he felt like he could understand the gist. With a short sigh, Seol Jihu looked out of the window once again. There were still dozens of carriages following them from behind. If there was one thing that caught his attention, it would be that the carriages each had huge distances between them. Looking at them, he couldn't help but think, maybe, for them, the banquet has already started. Chapter 113. Harem of Hell. It wasn't such a good idea to ride a carriage through a desert. The soft sand could easily break the wheels, and the running speed also had to slow down significantly. Because of the hot sand, the horses pulling the carriage would also become tired easily. Of course, it wasn't as if they would suddenly collapse, especially with an ample supply of water and hay, but considering that the team was traveling in the salt desert that was known for its hilly terrain, traveling by carriage was definitely inefficient. As such, once the team arrived at the entrance of the desert, they began to cross it on foot. As expected of a desert, the daytime temperature was scorching hot, as if the air itself was boiling. Furthermore, every time one took a breath, a salty smell stung the nose, inducing one to feel parched. Seol Jihu walked in this terrible environment, but he didn't look like he was having a hard time. It wasn't that his face didn't show it, but that he really found it quite simple. This was mainly due to his stamina stat having risen to intermediate, but it was also because he had endured much greater mental pain. Compared to the time he had no water or food for 8 days while having to constantly escape without a wink of sleep, walking in this desert was like taking a stroll in heaven. After all, he had food, water, and a clear destination. This was also why he was fine carrying the tired Maria on his back. However, even though Seol Jihu had no problem with the environment, his complexion was still dark for one small reason, and that was the large group of people following them at a distance. Chohong told him to ignore them, saying, "Those hyenas would have attacked us already if they wanted to. Don't worry." But Seol Jihu found it hard to just forget about them. The glances that sometimes pricked his neck and back were too chilling. They bothered him more because their hostility was so explicit rather than furtive. They got smaller again. In just a day or two, the group that seemed like an army of millions at the start had now been cut down by half. The missing people might have given up and gone back, but Seol Jihu knew that this wasn't the only reason. It wasn't that he was afraid. Level 4 Barbarian Warrior Richard Hugo. Level 5 Chief Priest Nameless Priest. Level 4 Thief Striker Sakamoto Jun. Level 5 Grand Pathfinder Ainz Kazuki. Level 4 High Priest Maria Yiriel. Level 5 Templar Chung Chohong. Being worried about a potential battle would be unfounded with such a powerful team. However, as Seol Jihu was at the front of the group, he couldn't help but worry that something would happen to his teammates while he wasn't watching. Hyung Nim. Noticing that Seol Jihu was putting a great deal of attention behind him, Jun spoke. "You know, to Earthlings, the banquet is like going to buy a biennial lottery." Seol Jihu listened in, even though he found it weird that Jun was referring to them as Earthlings. If we calculate simply in terms of sample size, then they have a 0.012% chance of winning this lottery. Is that high or low? It's high, extremely. That's about a 1 in 8 million chance. In comparison, real lotteries are about 1 in 300 million. But you have to bet your life on this one. Not necessarily. From what I know, you can leave stage 3 in the middle. And if you're lucky and manage to clear it, it's the same as winning a progressive Powerball jackpot that's been carried over for multiple drawings. It sounded like Jun was quite knowledgeable about how foreign lotteries worked. He glanced back before spinning his short katana and sniggered. What's important is that level 4s, level 3s, and even level 2s have been winners. Though, that's only in the beginning. Most importantly, depending on the individual, the harmonious wish can be a reward that's equivalent to the wish that can be granted by the gods. There might be people dreaming about turning their life around like me, or there might be others with other dreams. Regardless, wouldn't you be willing to bet your life on such a chance? Seol Jihu sighed. But still, if we had just filled up all spots from beginning. Seol Jihu was about to finish by saying, they might not have followed us. However, he swallowed his words. Would those people really not have followed the group if they had come as a team of 10? And if they did follow them, how should the group interpret that? Don't make that conclusion so hastily, Hyung-nim. There aren't many things in this world you can be sure about. Jun laughed, but Seol Jihu couldn't. Jun was implying that Kazuki had left 3 spots on purpose, essentially telling the followers, we'll leave some breadcrumbs, so don't bother us. Ah, but don't misunderstand either. The reason Kazuki Hyung-nim only gathered the 7 of us is also because he cares a lot about the team color. Team color? Yep. Having more people isn't always a good thing, especially when it concerns working together in a team. For example, what's on your back? Jun poked the short, robed figure piggybacked on Seol Jihu. As Maria was normally extremely weak to heat waves, she was in a groggy state from the sweltering heat. Look at little Maria-chan. She was allowed in because we weren't in a position to be picky. Otherwise, with Kazuki Hyung-nim's personality, he would have seriously considered rejecting her. But Miss Maria is... Ah, I know. She's an excellent priest. The problem is her personality. To be precise, it's her interpersonal relationship and sociability. Seol Jihu was at a loss for words. He couldn't say anything in response because Jun made a good point. I'm sure Kazuki Hyung-nim is nervous. I sure am. Having 2 of the 6 crazies in one team? My God. However, as if she'd had enough of it, an angry came from Seol Jihu's back, and the robed figure wriggled powerfully. Shut the fuck up, was what she seemed to be saying. Seol Jihu thought she had fallen asleep, but it seemed she at least had her ears open. He tilde wriggling Maria-chan is cute too, tilde, while Jun giggled. Seol Jihu glanced to the side. This was because Jun mentioning the 6 crazies had reminded him of someone. He spoke quietly. Then what about Chohong? Chohong Noonan is different. Jun gestured at Seol Jihu to come closer before speaking softly. Not only is she a high ranker, but she's also famous as the Slaughter Maiden. I'm certain she is the biggest reason those hyenas aren't coming anywhere near us. Really? Yep. It's obvious what will happen if they do. She'll blow their heads to smithereens. Speaking of which, that weapon of hers is really... Chohong must have heard them as her neck stiffened. Her bent back also stood tall like a bamboo. Hey, why are you talking so much in the middle of a march? Aren't you thirsty? She even handed Jun a water bottle. From the looks of it, she had been listening in from the start. She had to be happy because Jun praised her while talking down on Maria. Oh, thank you. Jun took the water bottle without hesitation. By the way, I agree with you. How can anyone be so weak as to collapse just because of the heat? It's not like we're out here on a picnic. Yes, I agree 1,000%. Look at her, piggybacked on Seol as if her life depended on it. Doesn't she think about the person carrying her? If it were me, I would have gotten down immediately from shame. You're right, Noonan. There's even you and Hugo, so why is she insisting on Seol's back? Noonan, are you Jill? No, you're right. You're always right. Seol Jihu felt the wriggling on his back getting rougher. With a wry laugh, he heaved her up before speaking. Miss Maria, stay still. You might fall down otherwise. I know. Be a good girl. They're just kidding. Everyone knows how skilled you are. As Seol Jihu worked to console the squirming Maria, Chohong's criticism increased in the end. Kazuki glanced back with a menacing look. With that, silence descended on the group once more. Just like Kazuki had mentioned, it took the team exactly 2 days to get to the entrance from Haramark. Since all entrances appeared at midnight, 6 or so hours must have gone by since it opened. The entrance was located at one of the fertile regions of the arid desert, an oasis. As its name implied, water and vegetation could be found in this place. But for an oasis, it was rather small. Rather than a lake, it was more like a pond or even a puddle. Seol Jihu surveyed the area before tilting his head. Setting aside the size of the oasis, he couldn't see anything that resembled an entrance. I read that the entrance comes in all colors and forms. Seol Jihu stared at the oasis thinking, could it be? And just as he expected, Kazuki pointed at the pool of water and told the group to get ready to go in. "We're going underwater?" When Seol Jihu asked, Kazuki nodded his head with a somewhat nervous expression. "Yes, we should hurry. There's no reason to delay going inside." In Kazuki's mind, the fact that no one had attacked them so far meant that they had accepted his unspoken deal. Still, he wanted to go in before the situation took an abrupt turn. I want to watch them fight. It'll be exciting." Hugo muttered wistfully, but Kazuki ignored him and turned to the robed priest fanning herself with her hand. "Just in case, please." The fanning stopped, and the moment the priest took out a crucifix. Woong. A short vibration rang out, and a white spherical film spread out from the center of the oasis. What was even more unbelievable was that the protective film expanded, becoming big enough to cover the entire oasis in less than a second. Even Maria stopped huffing and opened her eyes like a rabbit. Holy fuck. This was the first time Seol Jihu heard Maria curse as a sign of astonishment. He couldn't help but admire high rankers once again. However, he wasn't given much time to stand around in awe. Kazuki walked in first and urged the rest of the team inside. This was because the hyenas following them became busy the moment the protective film was created. "Seol, hurry!" "Okay, splash, splash." Seol Jihu blinked his eyes even as he walked into the water at Chohong's urging. What was he supposed to do? "I'll go ahead." "Let's meet again at the unknown place." At that moment, Jun and Hugo shouted before jumping in. Splash. Water sprayed up as the two instantly vanished. Seol Jihu's jaw dropped open. The water wasn't that deep, but they had disappeared without a trace. Those sons of bitches. Having been hit on the cheek by the water, Chohong bent her waist forward, and then Kazuki also dove in. The two of them soon disappeared. Seol Jihu couldn't find Maria anywhere either. When he felt something touching his shoulders, he flinched and turned around. The nameless priest had her hands on his shoulders. "Aren't you going in?" Seol Jihu asked. The priest didn't say anything. She simply pressed down on his shoulders gently. "Does she want to go in with me?" He might be mistaken, but it looked like she was afraid to leave him alone. He felt strange. The priest was treating him like a child by a river. "I'm fine by myself, though." He grumbled inwardly, but for some reason he kind of enjoyed it. Just like that, the two of them sunk underwater. As more and more water began to fill his vision, he saw people popping out from various places, people distancing themselves from each other, people charging toward the oasis without caring for defense, and people aiming attacks at others. Seol Jihu closed his eyes. He focused on the flowing water, and a sense of déjà vu overcame him. Was it at the huge stone rocky mountain? It was the same feeling he'd gotten when he was floating in the lake, contemplating about Flash Step. Right. I was feeling the flow of the water. But... Suddenly remembering Agnes's butt, Seol Jihu shook his head. At that moment, a sudden sinking feeling engulfed him. Ploosh, quack. Immediately afterwards, he felt his butt fall on something soft. Puha. Seol Jihu opened his eyes, realizing that he was no longer underwater. Although he was still soaked, he at least wasn't at the oasis. Looking around, he noticed that he was in a panic room similar to the one he had escaped to with Teresa back at the laboratory. "Sa, save me." Suddenly, a moan rang out, and Seol Jihu looked down in a fluster. Maria was crushed flat under his butt, hitting the floor with her palm. Startled, Seol Jihu quickly shot up. "Maria?" "Fucking hell, cough, cough." The foul-mouthed girl scowled like a demon from hell. But when she saw the youth sitting on top of her, she flinched and then pouted her cherry-like lips. "Appa Tilda, you should have been more careful. I thought you'd break my back." Seol Jihu was expecting her to spit out another bucket full of curses, so he breathed a sigh of relief when he heard what she actually said. "Are you okay?" "Do I look okay? Hurry and help me up." She was just as blunt as always, but she wasn't going berserk. Seol Jihu thanked the gods that the effect of the silver coins hadn't disappeared. However, if there was one thing the youth was mistaken about, it was that money wasn't the only reason for Maria's relative calm. Although it was only a little, Maria was feeling indebted to Sial Jihu for carrying her through the desert. "Anyways, where are we?" Sial Jihu asked as he grabbed Maria's hand and pulled her up. The room seemed to be around 65 square meters. "I don't know," Maria replied with an apathetic face. She had her head tilted to the side and was currently busy squeezing out water from her wet hair. "You two are from the same team?" At that moment, a high soprano tone voice rang out. Maria and Sial Jihu quickly turned around, and their eyes immediately widened in shock. They saw two women sitting with their knees together in the corner of the room. The one who had spoken up was the woman with aquiline eyes, a bob-cut hair, and a beauty mark under her left eye. The one sitting next to her and staring at them blankly was a feeble girl who looked like she was sick. Her long, silky hair stood out because it was silver. The important thing was that Sial Jihu wasn't familiar with either of them. What? Quickly scanning the room, Sial Jihu realized that the other 5 members of the team were missing. No way. Jang Maldong had initially planned to train only Sial Jihu's proficiency with Mana Spear, because Stage 1 and 2 were supposed to be team missions. People entering from the same entrance will be moved to the same place. This rule had been broken for the first time in the 5th banquet. From the looks of it, not all of your teammates are here." The bob-cut woman murmured as if she read Sial Jihu and Maria's expressions. "What's going on?" "I don't know. I didn't see my teammates either when I opened my eyes. It looks like it's the same for this kid." The bob-cut woman shrugged her shoulders as she smiled with her eyes. Sial Jihu bit his lower lip and tried to take out the communication crystal. It was then. That won't work. He paused as the woman made it sound like she already tried it. "Ah, we're fucked, aren't we?" Maria's survival instincts had been triggered, and she pitifully looked up at the ceiling. Then she quickly stuck to Sial Jihu's side. "Appa Tilda, you won't abandon me, right? Right, Tilda?" "Why would I abandon you, Miss Maria?" Maria had said this half-jokingly, but when Sial Jihu replied more seriously than she thought, she was the one who was taken aback. It was then. Suddenly, someone fell down from the air. Thud, quack, and Maria was crushed once again. Oh. Sial Jihu blankly stared at the woman who had appeared out of nowhere and was rubbing her buttocks with a frown, as well as Maria lying down in a Chinese letter position, convulsing like a wriggling caterpillar. Chapter 114. Role-playing. Peek. A sorrowful screech resounded in the room. Having become a flattened squid twice, the tears Maria had been holding back finally burst out. As a result, the newcomer had to deal with a terrifying amount of pure anger. Thankfully, she seemed to have a mild personality, as she simply took Maria's screaming. I'm sorry. She apologized repeatedly, and after a while, the fuming Maria finished venting her anger and stomped away to the corner of the room before squatting down. From the way she held her crucifix close, it seemed she was debating casting a barrier around herself. But since she couldn't waste her precious saved spells, she only gritted her teeth. Sial Jihu contemplated consoling her but chose to just sit against the wall. Since he realized what situation he was in, he needed some time to organize his thoughts. Why? The rule that had never been broken in the past 4 banquets had just been broken. But why? There's no way to find out. If there was an existence supervising the banquet, Sial Jihu wouldn't hesitate to grab him by the collar and shake him around. He was secretly hoping to discover the secret behind the biannual banquets, but things had only gotten more confusing. If there was one thing he could be glad about, it was that he wasn't separated from Maria. Get a grip. Chak! Sial Jihu slapped his cheeks hard. Immediately, he felt several gazes fall on him. However, he paid no attention to them. Pause everything. The plans prepared under the assumption of moving as a team, the thoughts about discovering the banquet's secret, he put them all on hold. He set his first and foremost goal to survival. He had to escape from this place alive and meet up with his comrades before thinking about anything else. Once he changed his mindset and focused on this one thing, he felt his head had gotten a little lighter. Sial Jihu slowly looked around the room, but no matter how many times he looked at it, it was still the same, simplistic room. The only noteworthy thing was that he couldn't see an entrance or an exit. That wasn't good news. After thinking about the matter once more, he activated 9 eyes. When the room changed color, Jihu immediately dropped his jaw in shock. Gold? The entire room shone in a golden hue. His entire vision became filled with a rolling golden wave. Jihu barely kept himself silent. Looking at the dazzling golden light, he immediately became less tense. But he tightened himself up in the next moment. After going through multiple incidents, he knew that the golden commandment wasn't necessarily a good thing. To do unto others as you would have them do unto you. An effect always followed a cause, and a cause always followed a reason. In that sense, how should he interpret this room being gold? There had to be a reason. A reason that this room was giving off the color of the golden rule. Depending on his choices, there was a chance he could obtain more than just survival. Jihu closed his eyes to concentrate. Because his nerves were all focused on his head, he didn't realize that the pale girl was leaning on her knees and staring fixedly at him. As the youth was absorbed in this new problem, more people began to appear. The room only had 4 people at first, but in just a few hours, the number increased to 7. Each newcomer had different reactions. Some were flustered about being separated from their teams, while others leisurely walked around the room. In any case, none of them straight out panicked, as they were all earthlings who had some level of experience in paradise. However, a somewhat competitive atmosphere descended in the room. Among the 7 people that now filled the room, there were 2 that especially grabbed the others' attention. One was a young woman with straight, shoulder-length hair. She seemed to be a warrior, judging by her silver composite armor and stylish long sword. Although she gave off a temperamental, easily offended impression, her face was expressionless. Not a hint of emotion could be found on her straight face. Compared to her, even Kazuki seemed like an expressive person. The other one was also a young woman. She had her long, brown hair tied up in a ponytail. The bow on her back and the quiver on her waist easily let others know what her class was. For whatever reason, she was smiling non-stop. However, it was the kind of sinister smile that sent chills down others' backs. With her serpentine, almond eyes and her gleaming pupils, she gave off a dangerous vibe that would make her look like a venomous snake if she stuck out her tongue. What? When Jihu took another look around, he gasped in his heart. All 6 members excluding him were female. Bob cut, straight face, snake eyes, the white headband girl, Maria, and the good-natured girl who apologized again and again. None of them were beauties that would stick out in a crowd, but Jihu felt weird just because he was surrounded by women of all nationalities. It wasn't as if he felt awkward or uncomfortable. He just felt strange. Surely there's gotta be another guy, right? As if to answer his question, someone fell from the air. Splat. Jihu heard a muddy splash. His expression brightened when he saw the newcomer's short hair, but it instantly contorted. When he touched his face, a crimson liquid came off. He, A lifeless laughter resounded. I did it. I entered. The dozens of arrows stuck on the man's back made him look like a hedgehog. From the looks of it, he must have been in a fierce competition over the entrance. Perhaps he had fought through hundreds of people just to get here. He should be rejoicing, but his complexion distorted instead. TK. He clutched at the floor hard enough to break his nails. Then he opened his mouth painfully. Someone. Jihu was about to get up and take a look when he felt someone tugging at his clothes. Turning to the side, he saw Maria shaking her head. Don't go near him. What do you mean? It's too late. But when Jihu turned back to the man, he became speechless. Tears of blood were falling from his bloodshot eyes. Healing his wounds is difficult enough, but poison already spread through his organs. It will be better to send him off painlessly. She was implying that treating his wounds would only make him suffer longer from the poison. And no. Did he hear Maria? The man began to desperately flail his arms and legs. I finally managed to enter the banquet. He tried to push himself up, but he soon collapsed as if he lost control of his limbs. I can't die here, his voice trembled. I need to find the cure and go back. His back curled up like the back of a shrimp. Mom. Tears poured out of his eyes as if he was overcome with grief. Mom. He cried for his mother for a long time before his eyes turned faint. Then at one point he suddenly stopped talking and moving. He died as soon as he came in. Seol Jihu rubbed his mouth to shake off the bitter taste inside. He wanted to help close his eyes, but he couldn't since he might also get afflicted with the poison. However, it seemed Seol Jihu wasn't the only one feeling sympathy. Both the bob-cut girl and the good-natured girl showed signs of pitying him. Of course, there was also someone who was completely opposite. Kick, Snake Eyes had her head dropped, her shoulders shaking from her snickering. Get a hold of this, retard. Mom tilde, she sneered at him as if she found his dying words to be hilarious. Hearing this, Bob Cut furrowed her brows. But Snake Eyes continued unfazed. I guess he got lucky and managed to get in with his terrible skills tilde well. It's a good thing he died here. She snickered before raising her head and licking her lips. Though, fuck the idiot who did this. If you're gonna kill him, make it clean. If you plaster poison all over his body, I can't loot his shit. Judging by her words, she would have already looted his corpse clean if it wasn't for the poison. What a shame, what a shame, seeing Snake Eyes mutter to herself. Bob Cut finally opened her mouth. Kick. But before she could say a word, the creak of a gear turning rang out. Then, a fierce rumbling swept through the room. Seol Jihu, who had his butt halfway off the ground, had his attention stolen by the wall on the other side of the room. A part of the wall, about 2 meters tall and 1 meter wide, was protruding out of the white wall. A door had appeared. In other words, stage 1 must have begun. Looks like we needed 8 people to leave the room. Bob Cut spoke up. She cleared her throat before continuing. Since a door appeared, I doubt we'll be getting any more people. How about it? Since we met here by a stroke of fate, why don't we introduce ourselves and— Bob Cut couldn't finish her sentence. It was because Straight Face, who was sitting on the floor the entire time, got up. Oh, you don't have to stand up to do it, Bob said with a smile, but Straight Face ignored her completely. Seeing Straight Face reach her arm toward the door, Bob Cut blinked her eyes in a daze. Hello, the one with the silver armor? Kick. The door opened. Straight Face immediately left the room. Bob Cut was left standing there with her mouth agape. Snake Eyes must have found this funny as she snickered once again, and when Bob Cut frowned, she finally burst out laughing. Puhahaha, can you get more obvious? What? Listen, you retarded bitch. Do you think this is the neutral zone, or do you think you're at a college retreat? And no, What, you want us to tell you about our hobbies? Maybe we can even tell each other fun facts. Snake Eyes' sharp criticism made Bob Cut tremble in place. Whatever. The 5 of you can make a campfire and do the cha-cha-cha for all I care. Bob Cut looked completely knocked out by Snake Eyes' venomous expression and open ridicule. How can you say that? In the end, she raised her voice with a dumbstruck look, but Straight Face and Snake Eyes were nowhere to be seen. The heck? She rolled her eyes, looking for someone to agree with her sentiments, and the good-natured girl made a troubled smile. After a brief moment of silence, the good-natured girl quietly spoke up. Should we leave too? Bob Cut's lips twitched as if she still had things to say. But once other people began to stand up, she had no choice but to do the same. She had no reason to stay in this room, and she knew she had to chase after the 2 who had already left. After all, they seemed to have the most expensive equipment out of the 8. No, 7. Straight Face's armor looked even better than Seol Jihu's. I don't like where this is going. Maria waited for the others to leave before muttering quietly, let's follow them for now and go our own way if things aren't looking good. You want us to move separately? Do as I say. My intuition has never been wrong, for some reason. Maria blurred the end of her speech. Seol Jihu neither agreed nor disagreed. Things weren't going as he expected, but it didn't seem like such a bad idea to see how things developed. When he walked through the door, he found himself in another empty room. The size of the room was similar to the one he had just been in, but there was a door on each side of the wall, so the rooms are connected. Seol Jihu wondered how this place was structured, but he shook off the thought forcefully. He had to first think about how to survive. After all, he had no clue what would happen from this moment on. Straight Face was standing in the middle of the room. She seemed to be deep in thought, so even Bob Cut couldn't say anything after catching up. Soon, Straight Face raised her head and walked forward. The moment she threw open the door without hesitation, swish. A long spear hurled toward her. Xiao Jihu tried to throw his spear reflexively, but Straight Face acted even faster. Her hand instantly went to her waist and a blue flash of light erupted. Xiao Jihu blinked once. When he opened his eyes, he saw a skull flying into the air and a headless skeleton collapsing onto the floor. Straight Face was standing in front of the door, just as expressionless as before. Plunk! The skull rolled around on the ground. Xiao Jihu stood astonished by her quick draw. That wasn't all. Straight Face disappeared inside like the wind and cleaned up the rest of the skeletons roaming around the room. Few Tilda Snake Eyes, who was watching leisurely, couldn't hide her surprise and whistled. "Damn, Tilda, you've got skills. What's your name?" I must have heard it at least one or twice. Of course, Straight Face still ignored everyone. Snake Eyes observed her closely before smirking and locking her fingers behind her head. In front of you, Tilda, Straight Face stopped. Snake Eyes sniggered and continued, "There's one stuck to the door." Straight Face looked forward before raising her sword. When Xiao Jihu saw blue flames shooting out of her sword, he couldn't hide his shock. As someone who had learned aura, he knew how hard it was to infuse one's weapon with refined energy. At last, Straight Face shot toward the door and stabbed her sword through. Crack! Her sword cleanly pierced the door. When she turned her sword halfway and pulled out, the blade was dripping with thick blood. When she opened the door, a black monster fell to its knees. "See?" Snake Eyes giggled. Straight Face quietly walked forward. Xiao Jihu was standing in the back, admiring Straight Face's swordsmanship, when he realized that she was fighting alone and went, "Ah." Even though it looked like she didn't really care, I should help. Xiao Jihu didn't want a free ride. He raised his spear, thinking to support her at the very least. He walked up stealthily in case Straight Face looked back. It was then, "Ooh, Tilda, looky here. Must be nice, Tilda, the only man in the group wants to help. How kind, how kind." Snake Eyes put a damper on things. Straight Face was about to open the frontal door when she heard this comment and glanced back. The hell! When Xiao Jihu met her indifferent eyes, saliva pooled in his mouth. Just what kind of experiences had she gone through to be able to suppress her emotions so viciously? Soon, Straight Face's mouth opened. "I'd like you to not bother me." Her monotonous voice was a bit deep and hoarse for a woman. Chapter 115. Role-playing 2. Straight Face continued talking before Xiao Jihu could say anything. "I see where you're coming from, but I don't let just anyone take my rear." Xiao Jihu refuted as he raised his spear. "I won't get in your way." "I think you will. Trust me." When he struck back confidently, Straight Face's eyebrows went up. She then examined the youth from top to bottom as if to check him out. His earrings, gloves, bracelet, and icy spear that gave off a frosty aura all caught her attention. Straight Face turned back to the front. Xiao Jihu took this as her giving consent. Snake Eyes, who was watching the scene play out amusingly, opened her mouth. "Perfect. There are 2 waiting by the door and 8 roaming around inside." The moment Snake Eyes finished her sentence, Straight Face threw the door open, and a sword and a spear flew in simultaneously. At the same time, the 2 monsters waiting by the door fell backward. The man and woman shot inside as if they'd agreed on it beforehand. "HM?" Snake Eyes blinked repeatedly. Her already narrow eyes narrowed even further. Not bad. She expected the bitch with the long sword to do as much, but the man supporting her wasn't to be underestimated either. "No. Wait a fucking minute." When she saw the energy seemingly boiling at the tip of his spear, she screamed internally. Fuck, he wasn't a level 4 but a high ranker. Snake Eyes tilted her head while thinking that can't be. Of course, she couldn't be further from the truth. With 2 people going wild, the time it took to clear the room was cut in half. Snake Eyes had kept her eyes on the group's only man the entire time. Once the battle ended, she pursed her lips. Although she didn't whistle, it was easy to see that she was surprised. Well, it's not like there aren't level 4s with high mana. Maria was also eyeing Xiao Jihu, prepared to use a spell if necessary. But when she heard what Snake Eyes said, she snorted inwardly. Straight Face seemed to trust Xiao Jihu after using him once, as she didn't just let him support her, but gave him an entire side to take care of on his own. As for Snake Eyes, she might have had a strange personality, but she was competent. Although she never personally participated in the battle, the fact that her scouting information was always right was a testament to her abilities. With Snake Eyes' accurate information, Straight Face's charging power, and Sial Jihu's support, clearing a room took no time at all. However, the problem was that there was no end in sight. For some reason, Straight Face insisted on going straight, taking the frontal door every time. Perhaps wanting to get out of this place as soon as possible, she fought and marched repeatedly. It wasn't until the 40th room that the group's unrelenting steps stopped. The 40th room didn't look any special, but there was one difference. Oh, there isn't a frontal door. Just like Snake Eyes said, the number of doors was reduced from 4 to 3. The people following them seemed to have noticed that something was off as they carefully examined the room while walking around. Snake Eyes drew something on a piece of paper before turning to Straight Face, who was standing still in front of a wall. "Hey, where are we going? Left or right?" It was then Kung. The sound of something falling and bumping into things rang out. Immediately afterwards, PSSH. PS. Parts of the 3 walls left, right, and front crumbled down, revealing densely packed launchers. Seeing dozens of sharp things raising their heads, Snake Eyes frowned for the first time. "Fuck, in an instant. PSH, PSSS. A chilling sound of air being cut scratched their ears, and at the same time, Luxu Lu Luxuria, Wung, a white dome-shaped barrier spread out. Tang, tang, tang. Maria managed to block the attack coming from the left and the right side by a hair's breadth, but she had to pour out her mana to stop the powerful force pushing into the barrier. 5 seconds. That seemed like 5 minutes passed by. The room then became silent, as if the previous ruckus was a lie. Hundreds of crossbow bolts were lying on the ground with smoke coming out of the launchers on the left and the right walls. Maria was wiping off the sweat on her forehead when she suddenly went, "Ah." Now that I think about it, the trap had activated on the frontal wall as well. In that case, the bolts must have shot the 3 people standing there. Although Maria made a split-second decision to cast a barrier because everything had happened so fast, she couldn't even think about helping out the vanguard. "Miss Maria, are you okay?" At that moment, a familiar voice struck her ears. Maria's eyes widened. She could see a yellowish light between the white smoke coming out of the walls. The light was none other than a triangular shield. When Sial Jihu noticed that a trap had been activated, he instantly embraced Straight Face, who was standing in front of the wall before activating his bracelet. Snake Eyes had also shrewdly hidden beside them. If it weren't for this artifact, all 3 of them would have been turned into meat paste. Because of the unexpected attack, even Straight Face had a crack in her stonewall expression. That said, it was only her eyes that had widened a bit, and even that only lasted a moment before reverting back. "Hold on." Her cheek was touching Sial Jihu's chest, so she gently pushed him away. Realizing the position they were in, Sial Jihu quickly let go of her, and Straight Face sighed as she stared at the countless crossbow bolts on the ground. "Ah," the face that had shown no emotions the entire time contorted with annoyance. Her complexion instantly became frozen, and she turned around for the first time. Behind her, 4 people were breathing sighs of relief. Straight Face opened her mouth. "Who was it?" When her cold, subdued voice flowed out, Maria and the others froze. Nothing had happened when they first came in the room. In other words, one of them must have done something to activate the trap. Silence ensued. When no one spoke up, Straight Face asked calmly, "Which one of you bitches was it?" Bob Cutt was planning to endure the criticism and let the incident pass, but when she heard Straight Face suddenly using profanity, she doubted her ears and asked back, What did you say?" "Do you want me to spell it out for you? Aren't you being too harsh?" "I almost died because of one of you fuckers, and you think I'm being too harsh?" Bob Cutt became speechless. She understood where Straight Face was coming from, but she still felt it wasn't fair. After all, she had barely moved after entering this room. Straight Face continued, "If you had to deal with people acting on their own and causing trouble, wouldn't you be angry too? I understand how you feel, but you're the one who is acting on your own. Of course, I'm grateful that you're clearing the way, but we can work together too." "Oh yeah." Straight Face folded her arms and twisted the corner of her mouth up. Her sneering face seemed to say, "Get a hold of this joker." "That's an interesting way of putting it, because I never once told you to follow me. Listen, aren't you guys the ones who followed me on your own?" Bob Cut clenched her teeth. "I know you're strong, but we can also. Sure, we can work together." Straight Face cut her off as if she knew what Bob Cut was going to say, "But you only thought about working together. If you really wanted to help, you would have stepped up like her, this guy and that kid." Straight Face's chin pointed to Snake Eyes, Seol Jihu, and Maria. Maria immediately shouted, "Who are you calling a kid?" But her words were buried in an instant by Bob Cut's protest. "That's why in the beginning the self-introduction. Are you stupid? It's not like we're in the neutral zone. Do you need to have everything explained to you? We could have at least said our class and level, as a way of sharing information. You're an archer. Looks like a level 3. Bob Cut nodded her head subconsciously. Shouldn't you have sharp eyes as an archer? Unless someone was actively trying to hide it, you should have been able to guess our classes based on our equipment. Seol Jihu stood astonished as he watched Straight Face nitpick on and on. She was so good with using facts in her verbal attacks that Seol Jihu began to pity Bob Cut. I'm over here working hard to clear a path. I sure as hell didn't expect to get criticized for doing something good." These words seemed to land the finishing blow as Bob Cut squeezed her eyes shut. Her chest huffed up and down before a long sigh escaped her mouth. "Sorry." Straight Face raised her eyebrows. "It was thoughtless of me to say that. I apologize." Hearing Bob Cut submit easily, Straight Face grinned. She rested her chin on the back of her hand and then tilted her head. Her face seemed to say, "Perfect. I was just getting bored." It's good that you acknowledged it quickly, but you already hurt my feelings. What should I do? More importantly, I'm not the type of person who believes in just talk." Her mocking tone clearly indicated her desire to toy with her prey. Bob Cut endured the humiliation and opened her mouth. "I'll show it with action." "Looks like you're not hopelessly stupid. How many rooms have we broken through so far?" When Straight Face suddenly asked Snake Eyes, who was watching the scene with an amused expression, Snake Eyes simply shrugged her shoulders. "How should I know?" "I know you're drawing a map." "Chet, so you were just pretending not to care." She took out a piece of paper from her pocket and began to count the rooms one by one. "This is the 40th room exactly." 40 rooms, Straight Face calmly recited the count before continuing. "Good. Taking the difference in our levels into account, just clear 20 rooms." 20. "I don't care whether you go left or right. But he, and I won't help you. Just like we did, you guys open the door and take care of what's inside." Straight Face emphasized the words, "you guys." Seol Jihu was about to politely lodge a complaint as he was excluded without a choice, but when he saw Maria glaring at him to stay put, he decided to just let things play out. "You don't want to, then don't, but I want you to stop following us." Bob Cut bit her lip. She didn't have a choice. "Fine, but once we break through 20 rooms. Then I'll comply with your self-introduction and move as a team." A deal had been reached. Bob Cut turned to face the 3 people next to her. 2 of them were priests, so they had to be excluded. The only one left was the woman holding her shield. The warrior-archer combination was certainly ideal. "Are you willing to help me?" When Bob Cut asked, the brown-haired woman, who had been watching silently until now, smiled, of course. Saying that she was feeling guilty doing nothing, she slowly held out her hand. "I'm Sophie Chalet, a level 3 shield warrior." Bob Cut's face became dazed before turning into a bright smile. "I'm Lara Wolf, a level 3 sharp ranger." The atmosphere turned wholesome for the first time since the banquet started. "Ha!" Snake Eyes snorted as she watched the 2 women shake hands, while Straight Face made a profound smile. And thus, Sophie Chalet and Lara Wolf began to clear the way together. Seol Jihu was forced to the sidelines against his will, but he stuck with his decision to let the situation play out. That said, he was cheering for the 2 women on the inside. In truth, Seol Jihu didn't see this woman named Lara Wolf in a bad light. Because it was true that she followed them without doing anything, he wouldn't have sided with her if all she did was complain. However, she had acknowledged her fault and apologized. She also brought up the self-introduction idea first. As Seol Jihu had learned the standard procedure, he found Straight Face's modus operandi to be the unconventional one. While he acknowledged Straight Face taking the lead to open up a path, she had done so of her own volition. She even told him to not bother her when he first tried to help. To be frank, Straight Face had changed her tune to her benefit when she was pushing Lara Wolf to a corner. Because of this, Seol Jihu cheered on the two women marching forward on their own. Unfortunately, just as he realized during the rescue mission, reality often wasn't beautiful. Putting aside the fact that the group was now breaking through the rooms at a much slower pace, the Level 3 duo began to struggle after a short time. The problem started with Lara Wolf. In front of this, It would have been one thing if she was a Pathfinder, but as a ranger who was more focused on combat abilities, she was lacking in scouting abilities. But even taking that into consideration, there was a world of difference between her and Snake Eyes, who would spit out accurate information in just a second or two. Priest Nim? She even asked Maria to cast a barrier before they opened the door, but Maria flatly refused. After all, a priest's spells weren't infinite. The end of Stage 1 was nowhere in sight, so if she used a spell every time they opened a door, she would run out of them in no time. Naturally, with inaccurate information, more burden was placed on the warrior. Sophie Chalet had abilities matching a Level 3, but all that meant was she was average. And because her armors were poor comparatively, she became more and more wounded as time passed. That wasn't all. Tilda so slow Tilda at this rate, it's going to take us months to clear Stage 1 Tilda. God, how did they even think to enter the banquet with their abilities? Were they hoping their team would carry them? Sometimes, the kind sister-in-law's concern was more annoying than the nagging mother-in-law, though in this case, Snake Eyes was nowhere close to being kind or concerned. They were already having a rough time, so they couldn't help but get angry when Snake Eyes provoked them from time to time. In the end, an accident occurred amidst the ugly atmosphere. A monster had swung down its axe and split Sophie Chalet's shield in half. Erak. The shield warrior fell on her butt with a shrill scream. Although she managed to escape with her life thanks to Maria's barrier, she was severely injured. Her left arm had been crushed to the point where her white bones were protruding out. Not easy, huh? Lara Wolf was sitting on the ground with a stunned expression when a shadow cast over her body. Straight Face was looking down at her while fiddling with her shoulder-length, black hair. Her arm can be healed, but without her shield, her combat ability would be halved. Yes. What are you going to do? You're not even at the halfway mark. Wasn't that the 8th? You. Continually fiddling with her hair, Straight Face suddenly grinned. Want me to let you off the hook? Excuse me. You still have 12 doors left to open, but it's not like there isn't another way to do that. What do you mean? When Lara Wolf asked with a face that wasn't expecting much, Straight Face raised her index finger. Ask politely. Ask if it's just that. Straight Face shook her finger left and right. I said politely. She then curled her finger until it pointed at the ground below her feet. First, crawl here on all fours. Immediately, Lara Wolf made an indescribable face. Even Snake Eyes' expression contorted strangely. Hiya. You're a huge pervert, huh? What a charming personality. The corner of Straight Face's mouth twisted up. This was more of a hobby than a personality. She felt an odd pleasure in seeing dignified, confident people submitting to her. It was the same with the current situation. Lara Wolf might have been happy when Sophie Chalet agreed to help her, but now she was driven to a corner. She had been full of hope just a moment ago, so how would she look crawling on the ground, unable to withstand the despair? Just imagining it sent a tingling feeling down her stomach, making her smile. Well, it will at least help my hurt feelings recover a little. Straight Face pushed her hair back and waited for a reply. It's okay. However, the answer came from Sophie Chalet, who was receiving treatment from Maria. We're almost halfway done. We'll keep going just a bit more. Oh yeah, Straight Face smacked her lips somewhat disappointedly. Then hurry. All this waiting around is making me bored. Got it. We'll continue as soon as my injuries are healed. Sophie spoke without losing her smile, and Straight Face turned back. On the other hand, Seol Jihu was struggling internally. Although he ended up on Straight Face's side, he didn't like the way she was handling things. She was bored, just like she said. It was as if she grew tedious waiting for an exit. She was then toying with the level 3 duo just for the fun of it, as they ended up getting trapped in a spider web. Once she got bored of doing this, she would no doubt return to charging through the rooms. If the three of them joined hands like in the beginning, they would be able to get out of this place quicker. Audiobook didn't want to waste his time on this farce. What should I do? Straight face and snake eyes. Sophie and Lara, Maria and HM. As Audiobook looked at each member of the party, his eyes stopped when it reached one girl. Chapter 116. Quickening she's. Now that he thought about it, there was someone else. When Audiobook and Maria first entered the room, there were two people inside. The first one was the bob-cut Lara Wolf, and the other was this girl with the white headband. Because she hadn't said a word this entire time, he had forgotten about her existence. Her snowy silver-white hair matched her white clothes. She was deeply absorbed in something to the point she didn't notice Audiobook's fixed gaze. Soon, the girl's eyes curled to a crescent moon shape, and she covered her mouth with her hand. She's laughing. What was she laughing about? Audiobook's eyes narrowed as he glanced in the direction the girl was looking. There, he saw Sophie Chalet, who was receiving treatment as she let out muffled groans. Lara Wolf, who had fallen into despair, Straight Face, who had her arms folded, and Snake Eyes, who was sniggering. One who suffered, one who sneered, and one who enjoyed watching. Suddenly, Audiobook was reminded of the middle-aged man who had struggled from guilt after abandoning his wife and daughter to run away. He was also reminded of Kang Seok, who had stood in front of him and laughed uncontrollably. She's different than how she looks, huh? The girl must have realized the youth's gaze as she raised her slim face. Their eyes met. Her arched eyes blinked a couple of times before she lowered her hand. Judging by the way her thin, pale lips were quivering slightly, she must have been laughing in secret. The girl didn't avoid Audiobook's gaze. She tilted her head slightly before setting it straight and beckoning him with her frail hand. Does she want me to get closer? Audiobook didn't hesitate. It didn't seem like a bad idea to try and talk to her, so he walked forward immediately. Because the girl was removed from the rest of the group, he had to walk a good distance. That said, they were both in the same room. Once he got close, the girl gave him a blank look while saying, "I think you're misunderstanding me." Her voice was quiet and soothing like a melody, but it also sounded empty and hollow. I laughed, but it wasn't because I was sneering at them or because I found the sight funny. The girl admitted to laughing but pleaded her case skillfully. Audiobook noticed how good she was at reading people's thoughts and felt a bit sorry. Even if the girl did laugh, Audiobook had no grounds to pick fault with it. He could think badly of her in his head, but the moment he said it out loud, he would end up being a nosy person. At the very least, that was Audiobook's perspective regarding the matter. It's fine. I don't mean to interfere in your business. Hearing this, the girl smiled while nodding her head. You were just staring at me so much. Audiobook observed the girl's hollow smile. Looking at her up close, he noticed how white, or rather pale, her cheeks were. Her waist was also extremely slender and delicate, as if she would snap in half if he held her with a little force. She clearly had an illness of some sort. If it's okay with you? Audiobook asked bluntly. Can you tell me why you were laughing? He didn't judge her. He was more curious than anything else. The girl looked up at him and muttered softly, because it seemed like a play. So she also felt that way. Audiobook laughed bitterly. Right? Yes. Audiobook agreed, as he had also been thinking that Straight Face was just enjoying her hobby. I was wondering why the majority of people got separated. I didn't expect to be role-playing at my age. Excuse me? I haven't even done it when I was little. The girl smiled brightly. Audiobook mulled over what she just said. It sounded like they were talking about different things. Role-playing? Audiobook tilted his head. You mean like a puppet show? No, I wouldn't say puppet, since everyone is acting as they normally would. Right, everyone is being true to their nature. Since no one is playing an assigned character or a fictional role, this isn't an ordinary role-play. In an instant, the girl fell into a world of her own. Looking at her, Audiobook wondered if he should continue talking to her or walk away. He wasn't sure if he was the idiot for being unable to understand her, or if she was simply talking in a cryptic way. The girl glanced at him with languid eyes. From the previous exchange, she realized that the youth had yet to understand. You see, I think there is a good chance that this group has been put together deliberately. What did that mean? I guess you could say this conflict was bound to happen. Why? Sial Jihu immediately asked back. The girl opened her mouth before revealing a troubled face. I know the reason in my head, but it's hard to explain in words. It's like different extremes or like counterparts. She gently scratched her lips with her index finger, seemingly trying to think of a good way to explain her theory. Soon, she pointed at herself and began. For example, if I am the altruistic person, Sial Jihu stared at her fixedly. The girl smiled sheepishly. What? I'm really kind. Anyways, if I am the altruistic person, then that person is the selfish person. The person the girl was pointing to was none other than Maria Yeriel. What do you mean? Sial Jihu asked back, but he immediately became speechless. He realized that the phrase, selfish person, described Maria perfectly. How did she know? Did she hear Maria talking to me about going our own way? Or was it because she refused to cast barriers? So you see. While all sorts of theories brushed past Sial Jihu's mind, the girl clenched her hands into fists and bumped them into each other. That person and I are counterparts. Sial Jihu stared at the girl with a complicated look. He finally understood what the girl was saying, but accepting it was a different matter. Also, next, the girl's finger headed to Lara Wolf. If she is the type of person who values cooperation and mutual help, she then pointed to Straight Face, then she is the self-centered maverick. Sial Jihu only looked half convinced. What the girl was saying made sense, but he was constantly plagued by the thought that there was no way to confirm it. The girl's finger then headed to Sophie Chalet. If she is the gentle person. She then pointed to Snake Eyes. Then she is the vicious person. Vicious? Yep. The girl nodded her head before saying, she smells rotten. She pinched her nose and said something more enigmatic. She's going to die early because of it. The more the girl talked, the more mysterious she became. Let's see. Sial Jihu chuckled inwardly and activated his 9 eyes. When he checked Snake Eyes' status window with the green color of general observation, he gasped. His eyes trembled as it confirmed the trait vicious, deliberately cruel and heartless. That wasn't all. Lara Wolf, Straight Face, and Sophie Chalet weren't too far off from what the girl said. As for Maria, she was obviously spot on. Impossible. Think about it. Sial Jihu turned back to the girl with widened eyes. With 4 pairs of people just as incompatible as water and oil, how can a conflict not break out? Sial Jihu subconsciously agreed. Not random. So that's what you meant when you said this group was put together deliberately. It fits too well to be a coincidence. Then, Sial Jihu paused briefly before continuing. What is the motive? The girl was talking non-stop for a long time, but this question made her shut her mouth. Obviously, it wasn't as if the girl was omniscient. I don't know, she admitted quietly. But for some reason, what you said about a puppet show is weighing on my mind. Sial Jihu had thrown the word around thoughtlessly, but the girl seemed to have taken it seriously. To be sure, we need the final piece of the puzzle. She blurred the end of her speech and looked up at the youth. Sial Jihu pointed to himself in a daze. Me? Immediately he went, ah. He had remembered the man who died as soon as he came in. If the girl's theory was correct, that man had to be his counterpart. Appa, have you heard of this saying? The girl stealthily changed the way she addressed him, but Sial Jihu didn't mind that much. Before he noticed, he had gotten fully absorbed in talking to the girl. That if you gather 5 people together, one person is always trash. I think I've read about it online. Wait, are you saying that I'm? Of course not. The girl denied it without hesitation. I hope that Appa is a treasure. Is that the counterpart of trash? Yes, because then an interesting situation will develop. Sial Jihu tilted his head curiously. The 3 pairs we know about are skewed the same way in terms of usefulness in battle and alignment of personality. She was right. In terms of ability, Straight Face, Snake Eyes, and Maria were elites, but the other 3 were the opposite. The former 3 also happened to have bad personality traits, while the latter 3 had the good ones. It would be terrible if Appa is on the other side, but if not, Then you would be the only counterexample in this group. We might be able to find out more about the existence who created this setting. The girl cupped her hands together and continued, "That's why I'm so curious. What kind of a person Seol Jihu was. Whether you're someone who will inflame the already wounded relationship, aggravate the division by playing politics, and seek to use the conflict to your benefit. Or whether you're someone who will mend the broken relationship, reconcile the division with words and bring everyone together like one who leads." In that instant, Seol felt as if his head had been struck by a hammer. "Your status window. Can you show it to me, please?" The girl requested, but Seol Jihu was no longer listening to her. The phrase he had forgotten about for the longest time, but one that was etched deep inside his consciousness. Executor. The one who leads. Ah! Suddenly, a strange sense of déjà vu crept over him. It was the same feeling he got when he was floating in huge stone Rocky Mountains Lake, the kind of wistful feeling similar to a word being stuck on the tip of the tongue. Before, he had lost touch with the sensation in a stupid way. Refusing to make the same mistake, Seol Jihu desperately searched his memory. The words the girl mentioned, role-playing, counterparts, deliberate, the one who leads. Finally, when he remembered the golden commandment he had seen at the start. Ah! The 5 words connected together, and a ray of light seemed to shine through the dark clouds in his head. He was progressing without a clear plan, but now he felt like he found the thread-like pathway to the solution. Of course, he couldn't be sure that it was the correct answer. After all, it was only a possibility, but he became convinced of one thing, and that was his role within this group: an altruistic person without skill, a calculative person with skill, a cooperative person without skill, a self-centered person with skill, a gentle person without skill, a vicious person with skill, and a person with skill who had yet to decide, so they want me to make up my mind. He had 2 paths to choose from. The answer was already out there. His 9 eyes were telling him which one to take when he thought this, "Can I do it?" He finally realized the gravity of the situation. At the same time, he realized just how difficult his job was. Setting aside the fact that they were complete strangers, leading straight face and snake eyes, 2 unpredictable and volatile individuals, seemed extremely difficult. Seol Jihu closed his eyes to calm his beating heart. Suddenly, the village head's words brushed past him. "We're living in such a time. There is no right or wrong in matters of survival. Whether you are a righteous man or of a wicked persuasion, you have to gather under one banner and pool your resources to survive. That is the case, even now." With that, he finally came to a decision. Now wasn't the time to worry about whether he could do it. He had to do it. Soon, his eyes flickered open. Let's do it. As Seol Jihu looked at the 6 people in the group, his eyes glistened like the stars in the night sky. Same time. The existence sitting on the corrupted throne trembled. With one hand supporting her head, her eyebrows slowly went up. The existence looked around the area with half-closed eyes. What spread out before her was a vast space. Around Paradise, the planet she inhabited, countless stars were forming a galaxy. The vision of a god was both physically and mentally on a different dimensional level than the vision of a human. Using her divine eyes, the existence read information about the movements and changes of the constellations. I felt a tingling sensation. The existence, who had devoured the chief deity, had detected it. There was no chance it was a simple matter. However, even when the existence examined the stars, she could not find anything out of place. Well, it did seem like some stars were grouped closer together, but the star in the center of it wasn't shining. Gathering around a dead star would not pose a threat to her. Was she mistaken about the feeling? She let out a subdued hum before closing her eyes once again. Thus, the existence sitting on the corrupted throne, the parasite queen, fell into a deep sleep. Chapter 117. The One Who Leads. Leader, a word referring to the commander who stands in the forefront, the individual at the center of a community, the one who proposes a direction for members to act. That was the leader. Then what were the requirements to become a leader? Martial prowess, wisdom, benevolence, fame. There were all sorts of requisites, but all of them boiled down to one factor: strength, eloquent speech, natural virtue and charisma, fame and reputation. Various methods existed, but in the end, the important thing was trust. Whether it be fidelity, which encompassed loyalty and faith, or confidence, which instilled confidence in others, a leader as an existence required trust. Seol Jihu subconsciously remembered Dylan, the brawny man of intelligence. His abilities were top-notch, and he led his teammates with calm judgment, even in situations of unexpected danger. Although the time Seol Jihu spent with him was short, the impression he left on him was so great that Seol Jihu still thought about him from time to time. What would Dylan have done? He asked himself this question, but he soon realized that it was meaningless. Dylan was Dylan, and Seol Jihu was Seol Jihu. He couldn't deny that he was lacking in many areas compared to Dylan. However, he had his own methods. Because he let the situation deteriorate to the current mess, the idea of bringing the team together sounded a bit far-fetched. However, getting started was half the battle. He had no intention of continuing this offhand approach. As such, he quickly began to make his move. At that moment, Sophie Chalet's treatment ended. Her arm had been bent in a strange angle with her bones sticking out of her flesh, but the level 4 healing spell, Cure Massive Wounds, successfully restored her left arm. Just to be sure, Sophie Chalet took out a bottle of healing potion she carried around for emergency situations. As she was slowly drinking it, a sharp voice rang out. "That's enough waiting. Can you get up now?" Straight Face was looking down at her with her unique, narrowed eyes. "You just lost your shield, so I understand why you're gloomy, but stop stalling for time. Don't you feel bad for the people who have to wait for you?" Lara Wolf, who was listening to her quietly, dropped her jaw in shock. She stared at Straight Face with a look that said, "Where did this bitch come from? The human body wasn't a calculator. Even if it was fully healed, it needed some time to recover from the shock." That was why Sophie Chalet was slowly drinking the healing potion to speed up the rate of recovery. But she was saying she couldn't even wait for that. It was obvious that she was just being childish and picking on Sophie because Sophie had interrupted her before. With Straight Face's condescending look and tone, even the most gentle person would get angry. However, Sophie didn't reveal even a hint of frustration. "Sorry, we'll continue right away." She smiled and gulped down the rest of the potion. Lara grit her teeth. She wanted to yell, "Aren't you being way too harsh?" However, knowing why Sophie was holding back and why they had to hold back, all she could do was clench her fists. Like the saying, "It's better to be a live dog than a dead lion." She knew that she would either die or be eliminated the moment she was abandoned. Sophie stood up and began to rummage through the wreckage. Her shield wasn't broken into pieces, but it was split in half through the middle. It was now more like a washboard for doing laundry than a shield, but thinking that it was better than nothing, Sophie picked up the 2 pieces. Immediately, a snicker rang out. "Wow, I'm crying. If it were up to me, I would have just crawled on the ground." "Oh, you're more pragmatic than I thought." "Is that a compliment?" "Of course, I like pragmatic people." Snake Eyes and Straight Face exchanged a conversation between themselves. Meanwhile, Lara Wolf's face flushed red as if she had reached her limit and was about to explode. It was at this point that Seol Jihu cut in. "I think it will be better for you to throw that shield away. It's only going to drag you down." Sophie's firm step stopped. Her eyes widened as she stared at the youth who gently spoke up. "Hey, are you adding fuel to the fire? You think she doesn't know?" Lara Wolf blew up and shot back, but the end of her speech blurred off. It was because she couldn't detect any hint of mockery or ridicule from the youth's tone or expression. Seol Jihu cleared his throat. "You did well. Then, I'll take the lead from now on." The moment he stepped out of the sidelines and announced his intent, Straight Face, Snake Eyes, Maria. Lara, Sophie, and the white headband girl, the 2 groups showed completely opposite reactions. Sophie looked back and forth with an anxious face. She couldn't help but be flustered when the man who had been silent until now suddenly took her side. Snake Eyes also seemed surprised as she let out a high-pitched whistle. "Oh, so the prince is finally coming to the rescue," she sniggered in a mocking tone before looking back at Straight Face. "Now it's time to defeat the witch." "Witch, how rude," Straight Face murmured calmly. Although she was smiling, It obviously didn't have good feelings behind it. After all, her eyebrows were furrowed slightly. It was the same with Maria, who muttered, "We would have at least gone halfway if you just stayed put." She was clearly unhappy that Sial Jihu had gone out of his way to intervene. Straight Face carefully studied Sial Jihu before the corner of her mouth twisted up. "I thought you were pragmatic, but you're surprisingly emotional. Well, what can I do?" Then she shrugged her shoulders, glancing at Lara and Sophie before smiling. "Prince Charming wants to get on his white horse, so I should move out of the way, right?" she even remarked. "Ah, Tilda, I should have been born a white girl, too." Understanding what she meant, Snake Eyes burst out laughing while the warrior and archer duo turned red. Sial Jihu calmly asked, "I'd like to ask you for a favor." "A favor? Can you take on the position of the keeper?" When he asked straightforwardly, Straight Face's eyebrows twitched. He was asking her to take on the role of protecting the priests when the vanguard position was the most dangerous. Sial Jihu turned his gaze and continued, "Also, I would like you to help coordinate from the back." "Me?" Snake Eyes pointed at herself after being singled out unexpectedly. "Yes, since a trap might activate like before. I'd like you to keep your eyes out for anything that might trigger it." This wasn't anything difficult, especially for an archer of Snake Eyes' caliber, and in a way, this also seemed to be the safest role. Snake Eyes tilted her head slightly before yelling, "Ha!" and bursting into laughter. "Hiya, our prince is quite a glutton, huh? Don't act like you're not. You're saying you want to eat those girls and us. I understand. You're a man with a dick hanging between your legs. Who can blame you for getting horny when you're surrounded by flowers? But don't be a glutton. If you eat everything just because you can get your hands on them, you will only end up with a sick stomach, Tilda." Hearing her telling him to pick a side, Sial Jihu smiled bitterly. Perhaps because of the joking comment Straight Face made, Snake Eyes was putting too much emphasis on him being the only man. But there was one thing he couldn't deny. "Glutton," she says, and that was his gluttony. He could have remained a bystander. Even now, he could abandon Straight Face and Snake Eyes and take the easy way of bringing the other four with him. However, that was not what Sial Jihu did, nor was it what he wanted to do. The world didn't revolve around one individual, and not everything went according to one's expectations. If there were days when things worked out, then there were also days when things didn't. One could be compatible with some people and incompatible with others. Similar situations frequently occurred in life. Was choosing the convenient way out always right? I don't know. He couldn't give a yes or no answer yet. However, he was willing to experiment which one was correct. He wanted to test whether his vessel was big enough to contain the two people trying to wander off. Right. To be completely honest, he wanted to taste all of them, even if they weren't to his taste. Forcing them into submission wasn't quite the way he would put it. But regardless, he felt like leading them would allow him to taste a special flavor. Once he admitted this, Snake Eyes' food analogy was spot on, and he cracked up, and hearing this laugh, Snake Eyes put on a strange expression. "You're laughing?" "Ah, sorry, I think you're misunderstanding something." "Misunderstanding? What am I misunderstanding?" Unlike how relaxed Sial Jihu appeared, Snake Eyes snapped back. "What's the reason you're stepping up now when you've stayed silent this entire time?" The question he had been waiting for finally came out. Sial Jihu spoke loud and clear, "Because of a time limit, though it's only a possibility." "What?" Snake Eyes was expecting something along the lines of, "I can't bear to watch any longer," and so she couldn't help but ask back, hearing this unexpected answer. Even Straight Face widened her eyes a bit. "I'm worried that this stage might have a time limit." "How do you know that?" "Can you guarantee that there isn't?" "Oh, get a hold of this, kid. We're playing with words now." 2 times. "You think I won't, HM?" Snake Eyes revealed a displeased expression before hearing Sial Jihu's muttering and blinking her eyes. Sial Jihu continued, "Not including this banquet, we have records on 4 stage 1s and 4 stage 2s. And out of these 8 stages, 2 of them had time limits." Sial Jihu smiled brightly. "We're talking about a 25% chance. I could be wrong, but wouldn't it be a good idea to keep this in mind?" Snake Eyes became speechless. With the banquet being so volatile and unpredictable, 25% was not a number that could be ignored. Scientia potentia est. Knowledge is power. If Seol Jihu had participated in the banquet relying only on his teammates, then he would have been at a loss for words. However, because he had investigated it thoroughly, he was rather knowledgeable. And now that he was using this knowledge to convince Straight Face and Snake Eyes, he definitely felt it was time well spent. Straight Face was showing various changes in her expression to the point she shouldn't be called Straight Face any longer. At the moment, a hint of interest had surfaced on her irritated face, almost as if she discovered a new toy to play with. It's not like we don't have a choice. If the 7 of us work together, we should be able to break through the first stage in no time. Seol Jihu put more strength into his voice, and even if there isn't a time limit, it wouldn't be bad to clear Stage 1 early. That way we can investigate Stage 2 ahead of everyone else. Seol Jihu had taken a rather roundabout way of explaining things. To summarize, he was saying, let's stop playing around and quickly get to Stage 2. Most Earthlings who participated in the banquet had Stage 2 as their minimum goal. That was because they could obtain the dissonant wish in Stage 2. In this sense, Seol Jihu had given a sound argument. Right, what he said made sense. Interesting, but the problem was with the way he put it. Seol Jihu's way of leading piqued Straight Face's interest. He seemed to be stirring a conflict at first, but he provided carrots in the form of keeper and coordinator positions and offered logic with a potential time limit. Straight Face had no reason to go against him, but she was a bit hesitant. She felt like the youth was gently consoling her after smacking her hard. Should I go along with this? She was in the middle of contemplating her decision when her eyes met Maria's. The blonde-haired girl grinned before stealthily moving behind Seol Jihu. The corner of Straight Face's mouth twisted. A skilled priest who specialized in healing was siding with the youth. This wasn't something she could ignore. Although she had a skilled archer on her side, strictly speaking, it was hard to call her an ally. As she was touchy and hypersensitive, she didn't trust others easily. But even without this, she knew Snake Eyes was the type of person who wouldn't hesitate to backstab. HNNG. She gave a condescending smile as if she found the youth's explanation laughable. I was planning on taking it easy with you. One step, then another. She slowly approached Seol Jihu and then stopped right in front of him. But I see you know how to have fun. When Seol Jihu met her deep eyes that didn't give off a hint of emotion, he felt cold sweat flow down his back. What kind of things did a woman need to go through to be able to make such a face? Calling her Straight Face was being nice. To be frank, discomforting face suited her more. Can you lend us a hand? Seol Jihu asked in a deeper voice. On the inside, he was thinking that this would be the last time he asked her nicely. He had a couple more cards under his sleeve to try and convince her. However, he didn't want to reveal all his secrets from the beginning nor cling to her desperately. Just like Prihai Hussey said, everyone had a limit to their vessel. Perhaps Straight Face felt the line drawn by the youth as she slowly raised her hand and placed it on her shoulder. The way she looked up at him while fiddling with the ends of her hair, she gave off a seductive aura, soon. Amen. She breathed out a short sigh before saying, Fine, since our prince wants to look after us so much, I see no reason to say no. Next, she slowly moved her hand and placed it on her chest. But what should I do? She suddenly made a fake, melancholic face. The wound in my heart hasn't healed yet. It hasn't been long since a certain someone dug a blade into it. You're exaggerating. Exaggerating? I really wanted to get along, but I've been betrayed. Seol Jihu made a wry smile and spoke. Then I'd like to try to soothe your wounded heart. With words? How many doors do you want? Straight Face's smile became even deep. She rested her chin on her index finger, pretending to be deep in thought. Then she opened her mouth. 40 should be enough to console me. It seemed she at least had an ounce of conscience in her as she asked for the same number of doors she opened initially. Fine. Seol Jihu agreed without arguing or negotiating. With this, he had gotten the biggest problem out of the way. Of course, he didn't think he did a perfect job. He had only prevented the festered wound from exploding, but that was more than enough to keep the group as a team. In any case, he now had a clear goal. The rest didn't seem all that difficult. Are you willing to help me? Lara and Sophie nodded their heads in a daze. A rope had come down from the sky just when they thought it was over. How could they refuse to grab onto it? Thank you. Then, currently, Lara and Sophie were suffering from low self-esteem. Since the reason for that was that they weren't doing much, Sial Jihu planned to resolve this first. When the duo heard Sial Jihu's request, they doubted their ears. That's all we have to do? That's the fastest way of breaking through the rooms. But, it's fine, I want to get to stage 2 as soon as possible. Shall we get going? Hearing Sial Jihu's urging, Sophie hurriedly ran to the door with a face mixed with gratitude and guilt. You don't have to give me a signal. Just open the door whenever. When the youth's voice flew behind her, Sophie didn't stop to look back and grabbed the doorknob. Just as she was told, she opened the door without hesitation. Immediately, boom, kayak. Along with a violent tremor, an explosive sound struck her ears. Sophie was in the middle of backing off but ended up falling on her butt. When she turned around reflexively, she saw Sial Jihu with his left arm out as if he had thrown something, and 4 women whose expressions were like the one she was making now. To top it off, even the previously calm and collected straight face and snake eyes were frozen stiff. Sophie blankly turned back to the door before letting out a gasp. A huge monster was collapsed on the ground with its upper body blown to smithereens. It had been killed before it could even utter a death throw. That's one door. Sial Jihu spun his left arm around and glanced back. Perhaps surprised by the power of his mana spear, Straight Face's smile was nowhere to be seen. Sial Jihu felt himself becoming more relaxed, for some reason. All right. The woman who looked so big in the beginning, let's keep going, now looked just like any other Earthling. Chapter 118. Result of Stage 1. Stage 1 resumed. If anything changed, it was that 6 out of the 7 members took on specific roles, even if it was only a formality. The process was a repetition of simple actions. First, Sophie Chalet would open the door and step to the side. Then, they would go in if no enemies could be seen. If there were enemies, Sial Jihu would first throw a mana spear before running in and commencing battle. The group would then move to the next room once the cleanup ended. Even though Sial Jihu had stepped up to lend Lara and Sophie his hand, it was still true that they were lacking in abilities compared to Straight Face and Snake Eyes. But in reality, the speed at which they were clearing the rooms was close to that of Straight Face and Snake Eyes. The key to this outcome was Maria. The blonde girl generously used the spells she had been saving up until now to support Sial Jihu. Just as Kim Hannah proclaimed, Maria was a priest whose professionalism rivaled her love for money. Although she wasn't happy with Sial Jihu's decisions, she didn't forget that he was her employer. Plus, Sial Jihu was a pushover who would easily throw out 80 silver coins. Unless he backstabbed her first, she had no reason to refuse to help, just because she disagreed with his decision. Maria wondered, if I supported him without a word of complaint, wouldn't he offer me another bag of money? With this expectation, she focused on supporting him to the best of her abilities. As a result, Sial Jihu was able to easily sweep through each room. The battles could be described as overwhelming victories, especially considering Sial Jihu was the only real fighter. However, Sial Jihu himself didn't think that way. Thank goodness. He credited his success to the intense training he had in huge stone Rocky Mountain. Having experienced the banquet's first stage, he was finally able to understand Jang Maldong's words. If he had participated in the banquet as he was 2 months ago, he would have been out of stamina before he could open just 20 doors. He might have been treated like a burden no different than Lara Wolf and Sophie Chalet, but many things changed after the hellish training. Originally, only his dexterity was low intermediate, but with his strength and stamina improving to the same level, the 3 elements began to work together. It was the same with his use of mana. In the past, he had gone all out no matter how strong or weak the enemies were, but now he could control the amount with finesse. His repertoire had gone from being crosses, hooks, and uppercuts to finally incorporating jabs. Of course, they were only jabs from Sial Jihu's perspective. To the enemies who had to face his attacks, his jabs felt like multiple crosses coming in at once. In any case, his battle speed had increased significantly. adding his long-ranged attack method in the form of his mana spear, the freezing effect of his close-ranged ice spear, and several other artifacts. The power he was displaying far surpassed that of a level 3. And when Xiao Jihu really charged through 40 doors in a short time, Snake Eyes' evaluation of a decently useful guy and Straight Face's evaluation of new toy had no choice but to change. Although Xiao Jihu fulfilled what he promised Straight Face, he continued to clear the way without a pause. This was partially because he had ample stamina left, but it was also because he wanted to show Straight Face and Snake Eyes through action that he really wanted to clear Stage 1 as soon as possible. He had no way of knowing how they took this subtle message, but he considered it a success since they stopped their snarky prattling. How much time went by? When Xiao Jihu finally stopped, he had already cleared over 100 rooms. To be precise, it was 120 rooms. Only after clearing 3 times the number of rooms Straight Face asked for did the youth pause. This room. The number of doors in the room went from 3 to 2. Based on the direction he entered the room, the frontal door and the right side door had disappeared. How about we take a break? We can eat something too. Hearing Maria's words, Xiao Jihu shook his head. No, it's fine, I can keep. No, but I'm not fine. When Xiao Jihu looked around the room awkwardly, Maria continued with a dull expression. You don't need to worry about others. Think about the number of doors you opened. Anyone who says a word of complaint is the asshole. Straight Face, who was listening silently, muttered with a chuckle. Ha, that sure sounds like it's directed at someone, kid. Call me a kid again and I'll blow your head off. Maria struck back without losing an inch. She stayed silent at first since Straight Face was doing all the work, but now that Xiao Jihu had taken the lead, she had lost her reason to hold back. Oh, now that's not a nice thing to say. Don't people often tell you to watch your mouth? Mind your own business. What's that got to do with you? You know what's a good way to fix anger management issues? How about it? I'm starting to think I want to help you fix it. Not really. You don't look stronger than Agnes anyways. What? Straight Face furrowed her brows. Claire Agnes? Let's take a break. Sensing that the conversation was heading in a hostile direction, Xiao Jihu quickly intervened. Maria, who had her hair up like an irritated cat, harumphed and turned away when Xiao Jihu patted her back. While Maria sat down in the corner of the room and munched on dried meat, Xiao Jihu fell in thought as he observed the room quietly. For the first time since they entered Stage 1, they had lost the ability to pick a direction. The way the frontal and right side walls were closed off, it was as if he was looking at a corner. Wait, corner, a theory popped up into his head. At that moment, a small ruckus buzzed out. What's wrong with you? Did you finally lose your mind? Just let me see it. Look at yours. I know you drew one too. I only started in the middle, so I don't know the beginning part. I just need to see it for a moment. Please? Lara and Snake Eyes were arguing. Xiao Jihu didn't know what happened, but it looked like Lara was the one bothering Snake Eyes. Until a moment ago, it looked like she wanted nothing to do with Snake Eyes and Straight Face, so what had gotten into her? 1 minute, no, 30 seconds is enough. Screw off. Are you crazy? What, you gained some confidence because Prince Charming over there fondled your anus? Do you have to talk like that? I'm asking because I want to help. Besides, it's not like it's anything hard. Snake Eyes chuckled as if she found Lara's statement laughable. Shortly afterward, she relaxed her arms. You're right, it's not hard. Then, sure, take it. Excuse me. When Lara asked, Snake Eyes grinned. I hate being hassled, so just take it. Where is it? Here, Tilda. Snake Eyes gestured at her half-open jacket with her eyes. To be exact, she was pointing to her bountiful cleavage that boasted a deep ravine. Lara was startled. WHWH what? Are you joking? Not at all, Tilda. You said you wanted to see the map I put in great effort to make. Is taking it yourself that difficult? Is it fun teasing people? Yes, very. It's so fun I might die. When Snake Eyes snickered, Lara muttered, "Cuke," and seethed in anger. Snake Eyes crossed her arms and tilted her chin up slightly. What? You're not going to take it? Then don't, Tilda. Lara fumed, but she still brought her trembling hand up. Xiao Jihu kept his eyes on the duo in case a problem broke out. It was then that he felt someone starting at him fixedly. When he turned around, he saw Straight Face staring at him with faint, mannerless eyes. She was right in front of him, having approached him before he noticed. "Can we talk for a moment?" "Talk?" "Yes, and let's move over to a quieter place." Snake Eyes glanced at the left door, which had not yet been opened. Then she began to move towards it before Seol Jihu could say a word. A monster howled the moment she opened the door, but it collapsed with a mournful cry after a couple flashes of light. Thud. Straight Face kicked the headless corpse of the monster before glancing at Seol Jihu and disappearing into the room. Even though Seol Jihu had seen her quick-draw countless times by now, it was just as terrifying now as it was in the beginning. When he entered the room, leaving behind several gazes, he saw Straight Face sitting against the wall. In that short period of time, she had taken care of the remaining monsters in the room. "Don't just stand there. Come sit." Seol Jihu nodded and sat down next to her. Straight Face closed her eyes before slowly opening her mouth. "People often tell you that you don't know how to read the air, right? You told me to come sit." Hearing the youth speak like he had been wrongly accused, the young woman looked up at the ceiling. Soon, a deep sigh escaped her mouth. After a brief silence, she spoke again. "Now that I've seen how you play, I understand why you were so bold." "Is that a compliment?" "Yep. Thank you, but it would still be nice if a certain someone helped out." Hearing Seol Jihu's subtle suggestion, a smile appeared on her face. She faced the youth and spoke with a delicate smile. "I've put some thought into it, and I think you're right. We're only at stage 1. Clearing it quickly will be convenient. That's why I wanted to ask." With Straight Face being oddly submissive, Seol Jihu became worried. He was being sarcastic when he asked her to help him. Now he somewhat regretted that decision. "You, me, and that snake, why don't the three of us go?" "What?" You can bring that kid too if you want. She's infuriating, but she does seem to have some skill." "That sounds like you want to abandon the other 3. Straight Face smiled. "Yep, that's exactly what I'm saying. You can even include that priest of Nvidia. She might seem useless now, but we never know." "By that logic, Miss Lara and Miss Sophie should also—" "Are you joking?" Straight Face cut him off as if he had just told the funniest joke. "I didn't take you to be a fool who would place a warrior and an archer on the same level of importance as a priest." Seol Jihu was about to disagree and call that a flawed argument when... "Plus, you know more than anyone else that those two aren't useful." He became speechless. "You don't have to think so hard. I get how strong you are, so just support me like you did in the beginning. I'll also give it my all, and we should be able to get through this place in no time." Seeing that the youth had fallen silent, she continued with a look of joy on her face. "If this stage really has a time limit, or if it's advantageous to get to stage 2 faster, wouldn't it be better to do as I say?" She wasn't wrong. If Straight Face and Snake Eyes participated at full power, their speed would increase significantly. Maria would also be able to save her spells. However, Seol Jihu couldn't help but think that this was all an excuse. Seol Jihu stared fixedly at the woman. "Am I wrong?" And just as he expected, she was looking at him with eyes full of anticipation. He felt like she was testing him. Although he couldn't be sure, he had a strong hunch that this woman simply wanted to see him abandon the 2 women or, at the very least, retract the offer he made. What a personality. Seol Jihu grumbled inwardly while clearing his throat. This wasn't all too surprising. After all, he didn't have the slightest bit of expectation to clear stage 1 so peacefully. Since he couldn't fully stitch up the wound, he expected a critical moment like this to come. "Yes, you're wrong." Seol Jihu opened his mouth. "I think it's better to bring them all with us." "HNNG, well, I'll be looking forward to it." Straight Face let out a nasal hum as if she had expected this answer. "So how are you going to console me?" "I think you mean persuade." "Well, go ahead." "First, you know that this banquet is different from the previous ones, yes?" Seol Jihu didn't want to prolong this conversation, so he cut straight to the chase. "You mean the fact that teams were separated?" "Yes." Seol Jihu continued, "But why?" "This has never happened before in the history of the banquet." Straight Face didn't react. Taking this to mean that she was listening attentively, Seol Jihu got to his main point. "Haven't you noticed that something is strange?" "Strange? Don't you think this stage 1 is too easy?" Straight Face's eyes narrowed. We've cleared 160 rooms so far, but none of them felt particularly difficult. In fact, they were all so-so. The problem is that Stage 1 and Stage 2 have never been considered easy in the history of the banquet. I'm not sure what you're getting at. As a reply, Seol Jihu began to recite a summary of all the past Stage 1s, that the participants were allowed to enter the past 4 banquets as teams, and that Stage 1 had been difficult from the very beginning. Also, according to the records, every member of a team had to work together to barely scrape by. It's almost as if the banquet imposed cooperation among the members who entered through the same entrance. If we were in their shoes, we wouldn't have been able to abandon a team member so easily. After all, unless someone was a total troll, every head would be important. However, this banquet was the opposite. Teams were separated, and Stage 1 difficult rate dropped significantly. Maybe the difficulty dropped because of the separation of teams. That's certainly a possibility, but it's too convenient of an answer. Seol Jihu shook his head at Straight Face's counterargument. Cooperation was the only factor that remained unchanged in the past Stage 1s and 2s. This banquet is the first time the need to cooperate disappeared. I believe that this is a trap. Although Straight Face did not notice, her eyes were widened to a circle. Her previous statement had been a light-hearted teasing, but the answer surpassed her imagination and made her mind reel. So, Straight Face murmured as if she was talking to herself. We'll fall into the trap the moment we abandon someone. Exactly. Straight Face tilted her head slightly and mulled over the idea. She was intelligent and surely wasn't a fool. She didn't take Seol Jihu's words lightly. I understand what you're saying, but it does sound a bit forced. She tilted her head side to side before asking a sharp question. What made you think this? Seol Jihu smacked his lips. He couldn't just say, because this entire area has the color of the golden rule. He had to make her understand some other way. He didn't need to think for too long. Since what the white hairband girl said gave him the idea in the first place, he could just tell her about that. Of course, he couldn't just say to her face, "You're the self-centered maverick." So he changed the words around a little. Counterparts is it. Thankfully, what the frail girl told him was enough to pique her interest. Straight Face rubbed her chin more seriously than ever before. After thinking for a long time, she glanced at the youth who was anxiously waiting for an answer. Our prince. Leisurely sweeping her hair back, she opened her cherry-red lips. Sure has a way with words. I wish you'd stop calling me a prince. Seol Jihu smiled bitterly. This is hard. You don't need to keep tugging them along. It will only be until Stage 1 ends. You're right, but... With my personality, letting them hitch a free ride is... It was then. Woo-woo-woo-woo. Before Straight Face could even finish her sentence, a loud cheer broke out in the room next door. The duo's gazes went up simultaneously. Chapter 119. Result of Stage 1, 2. The scream belonged to Lara Wolf. Seol Jihu stopped the conversation and hurriedly crossed over to the next room. There, he saw a short-haired girl full of sweat on her forehead. Although she was panting as if she had raced here at full speed, she still looked extremely happy. I figured it out. I figured it out. Lara wiped her forehead and shook the paper in her hand. When Seol Jihu walked closer and inspected it, he noticed that it was a map. He turned to Snake Eyes, who promptly raised her hands. I don't know. She took the map and suddenly ran around like a crazy bitch. Snake Eyes gestured at the door with her chin. It was the door they had opened to enter this room. She went back the way we came from. Seol Jihu also had a guess, so he asked, Where did you go? What did you figure out? So noisy. Straight Face also asked. Lara made a V sign with her hand. I went back the way we came from. Then she folded her middle finger, and I found out where we are. In other words, she had figured out the general shape of Stage 1. Straight Face stepped out. Say it. Excuse me? You said you figured it out, right? Tell us how this place is laid out then. Lara was dumbfounded by her tone that resembled a loan shark. She seemed to be saying, it's going to get ugly if it's nothing important. However, she quickly got her act together. It's simple. The shape of Stage 1 is most likely a rectangle. Rectangle? Yes. You went straight from the first room. That was to check the length of the labyrinth, right? HNNG, Straight Face let out a nasal hum. Looks like you're not completely stupid. It was a piece of cake. Strange. I remember a certain someone saying she would act independently just an hour or two ago. Cuke. Lara clenched her teeth. That's. But when Straight Face waved her hand, shutting down her protest, Lara continued her explanation. We went through 40 rooms from the first one we started in before the frontal door disappeared, so it should be right to assume the labyrinth has a vertical length of 40 rooms. Snake Eyes rolled her eyes. You're right. Then, including the room where we turned left, how many doors did Prince Charming open? 120. He opened 120 doors, and none of the rooms had a door on the right side, and there wasn't a frontal door in the 120th room. So if the labyrinth really is a rectangle, then we should be at the top left corner. Isn't it too early to decide? Straight Face spoke up at that moment with her unique, condescending smile. If my memory serves right, there were 3 doors in the room where we changed direction. You're right. There was a door on the right, too. Snake Eyes agreed with a nod. Lara stared at Straight Face for a brief moment before grabbing the end of her hair. Then she narrowed her eyes as she fiddled with her hair. Oh, didn't I just tell you where I went? She made her voice airy, clearly imitating someone. Straight Face's expression stiffened. Seeing this, Lara quickly put her hand down. All right, so I went back to open the door on the right. Sial Jihu, who was quietly watching the scene play out from the side, showed a hint of surprise. From the looks of it, Lara had gone all the way back while he and Straight Face were talking. Although the group had cleaned up the rooms, she had run through 120 rooms and back. Well, it is a straight line. Despite how I look, I am an archer. Lara smiled gently at Sial Jihu before continuing. That's when I confirmed my conjecture. That room had 2 doors just like this one where I entered from and one on the right. Sial Jihu's mouth opened with a brief mutter. So that room must be the top right room? Exactly. So there are 122 rooms going horizontally and 40 rooms going vertically, a 40 by 122 structure. That's right, assuming the room we were summoned to doesn't count. Lara raised the map so everyone could see. The map had a shaped pathway. Sophie spoke up after examining the map closely. It's like a game of snake. Me. Sophie covered her mouth and giggled at Snake Eyes' question, then shook her head. It was a game I used to play on my electronic dictionary when I was little. You control a snake that goes around eating food that is randomly generated. With an explanation, Sophie pointed at the map. Among the rooms that are left, where do you think is the exit? How should I know? Right, then we'll have no choice but to check each room. Sophie pointed at the room on the top left corner, the one they were in. Opening doors randomly will only make the game more complicated. Since we don't know where the exit is, the best course of action would be to plan the most efficient way to visit each room. Like this. Sophie moved her finger down to the bottom left corner, then to the right, up, left, then back down. Just like a coiled-up snake, she spun her finger in a counterclockwise direction, drawing a whirlpool before finally ending in the centermost room. Snake Eyes frowned. Hell, so we have to go through every room? That's only if we don't find the exit until we reach the center, but this is one of the most efficient ways. I agree. Looks like it's obvious what we should do. Sial Jihu agreed. The group had been running without a headlight, but they now had a clear direction. When Sial Jihu gave Lara a look of praise, Lara twisted her body. It's nothing much. Anyone could have figured this out if we just checked the room on the right before going left. Still, there might have been monsters in it. Yes, to be honest, I was really worried, but I didn't think it was right for just the 3 of you to put yourselves in danger. Sophie smiled faintly. Sial Jihu glanced at Straight Face in secret. Seeing the glance that seemed to say, are they still freeloading? Straight Face let out an empty laugh like it wasn't enough to satisfy her. Who knows? We still haven't seen the 39 rooms on the rightmost side. Lara's shoulders dropped and a sigh came out. Can't you just say well done? You don't even have to mean it. Where'd you drop your conscience? Don't act so haughty after opening a single door. Lara shook her head, expressing her disagreement. Tusk. With a click of her tongue, Straight Face turned to Snake Eyes. You. Me? Let's go. Snake Eyes tilted her head slightly, but Straight Face didn't offer an explanation and turned back to Sial Jihu. 80. Sial Jihu understood her intent and slowly nodded his head. Sure, we'll switch after 80 rooms. Straight Face snorted, but that was all she had to say. Sial Jihu had performed beyond what he had promised and had even offered a new method. Lara had also proven she wasn't a freeloader. What are you doing? Get over here. As Straight Face urged Snake Eyes, Sial Jihu couldn't help but smile on the inside. It felt like the wound got stitched up stronger. Of course, it had yet to heal completely. Fuck. Snake Eyes spat out a curse. Her complexion, as she looked at the frontal door, was one of exhaustion. Snake game my ass. We should have just gone to the centermost room to begin with. We did all that work for what? Embarrassed, Sophie dropped her head. The group had taken the method she suggested, but no one expected that they wouldn't find the exit before reaching the centermost room. That's not necessarily true. Maybe the exit isn't in a fixed room. Maybe we have to enter every room before the exit opens. When Sial Jihu sided with Sophie, Snake Eyes narrowed her eyes. Wait, you're telling me that the exit might not be in the next room? We'd have to go through the 39 rooms on the rightmost side. Snake Eyes pressed her temples and screamed. I was all excited for the banquet. The hell is this? Where's all the killing and backstabbing and, the fun stuff? It's gotta be more hardcore than this. Sial Jihu wanted to say, I don't think that's it, but he kept quiet, thinking there was no reason to provoke her. Judging by what Snake Eyes was saying, the banquet was supposed to be much more difficult. Ah, fuck. I want to say fuck it all to the banquet or whatever. I'm going to cry if stage 2 is like this too. Snake Eyes spat out one complaint after another, before pushing Straight Face to the side and throwing the door open. Taken aback by Snake Eyes' sudden action, Lara moved to stop her but stopped almost immediately. With Snake Eyes' skills, it was likely that she acted after checking for any potential threat. More importantly, her spazzing eyes seemed to be searching for a target to vent her anger. Soon the word, fuck, rang out from the room. The 6 of them, who stepped into the room late, all stood stunned as if they had all promised to react the same way before entering. They saw a normal room that was no different than any of the others. Why aren't there any doors? The only difference, like Snake Eyes said, was that the door they used to enter was the only door. After examining the room slowly, Sial Jihu noticed this incongruity. The door we used to enter the room is the only door. That meant that they couldn't have entered the room through other directions. It was then Kirik. A familiar sound rang out, DRRRK, and a tremor shook the room. It was the same phenomenon they experienced in the room they were summoned to. The door disappeared, Maria shouted. Sial Jihu turned around instinctively and frowned. Just like what Maria said, the door they used to enter was gone. It had disappeared without a trace, as if it blended into the wall. Straight Face pulled out her glowing silver longsword and slowly backed off. Shit. Snake Eyes picked up her weapon for the first time as she also backed off slowly. Sial Jihu did the same while tightly holding onto his ice spear. The 5 combatants stood in a circle around the 2 priests. The room quickly turned silent. Maria's muffled chants were the only sound. Tension slowly seeped in, but Sial Jihu decided to first wait. Activating the 9 eyes, he saw that the room was glowing with a golden light just like before. I did everything I could. Although he wasn't happy with the process, he had succeeded in preventing the team's collapse and brought all 7 members here. Although 1 person died, he was already on the verge of death when he entered the stage, so there was nothing anyone could do. Right, he had done everything he could. If the 9 eyes wasn't lying, if this space really was a place of golden rule, then now was time to accept the result. At that moment, a cool breeze tickled his forehead. Sial Jihu turned his head up, his eyes immediately widening. It wasn't just him. The 7 members of the group were all looking at the slowly splitting ceiling with looks of disbelief. As if a huge box was opening up, or as if a huge bird was spreading its wings, the ceiling opened up and a clear sky revealed itself. Immediately, Kijik, Kijiejik. Unpleasant noise struck their ears. In the next moment, their sense of balance shook and their bodies tilted sideways. Jihu stopped Maria from falling and was shocked to see the walls around them going down. No, that wasn't it. What? We're going up. Like Snake Eyes said, the ground they were standing on was going up. Like an elevator, the ground rose toward the open ceiling. Once the ground passed the ceiling, the outside scenery appeared. Jihu looked down in a daze. He could see the ground getting farther and farther away from a rectangular structure. The shape of the labyrinth was just as Lara had guessed. What happened? Someone muttered. However, no one could answer that question. They could only guess. As I thought. Lara mumbled to herself, and everyone's gaze naturally fell on her. She flinched in a fluster and then opened her mouth. Ah, I meant the banquet. I'm convinced now. Convinced. There are several theories, but I think the banquet really is the Empire's inheritance. Some say the banquet is a stage created by a god from the era of the ancient empire to carry out some sort of a test. Others say it is a game created by a grand magician for his amusement. Some even call it a lair that the extinct dragons created as a dummy. Jang Maldong's words flashed by Jihu's head. Lara stomped the moving ground with her foot. Don't you think so? The kingdom's technology isn't enough to make this stage. To have created something like this, at the very least, it would have to be the Empire, which is said to have reached the pinnacle of magic engineering. That makes sense, but Jihu was only half convinced as he looked around the area. The labyrinth they left now looked like a dot. Looking at it, his lower stomach churned. He didn't have acrophobia, but he couldn't help but be a little nervous as the platform went up endlessly. In the end, he had to take a couple of breaths before the surrounding scenery entered his sight. The first thing that caught his attention was a giant mountain that stretched endlessly into the sky. He couldn't see the peak, even though the platform continued to travel up since leaving the labyrinth. Hey, there are people there. Jihu immediately turned his head at Snake Eyes' words. The place she was pointing to was several hundred meters away, so he couldn't see well with his naked eyes. But that didn't seem to be the case for Lara and Snake Eyes, who were archers. They both were clearly staring at a single spot. Chapter 120. Result of Stage 1-3. What are they doing? They're going up the stairs. Snake Eyes' voice went up. But unlike archers, warriors and priests could not see the situation clearly. The scene only appeared as a speck of light. 4 people, they're fighting a monster. New information continued to pour in. What was going on? Was this Stage 2? While Jihu was postulating several hypotheses, he caught sight of Straight Face, who was looking down silently. There are stairs here as well. Just as she said, the platform they were riding on also had stairs going up the mountain. It's long. Seeing the stairs stretch all the way to the foot of the mountain, Jihu's jaw dropped. Pillars. One thing that caught his attention was the pillars. There were flat platforms periodically throughout the staircase, and each platform had a single pillar standing on it. You. Straight Face turned back. You said 4 people were climbing up the stairs, right? Yeah. Where? Describe it relative to the mountain. About the middle. Do you see anyone else? Hold on. Snake Eyes looked around. Then she fixedly stared in the direction Lara was looking at and frowned. You saw it? I did. It appeared suddenly, right? Why, yes. Lara nodded her head crazily. It appeared suddenly. What's it? When Straight Face asked, Snake Eyes muttered back. There's only 2 over there. Fuck, what's going on? Just describe exactly what you're seeing. Snake Eyes grit her teeth in bewilderment. Over there, they only have 2 people. They're near the foot of the mountain, but while they were climbing up, a monster suddenly popped out of nowhere. I'm not kidding. It really appeared out of thin air. How did the 2 react? They're fighting. Lara replied while still watching the far-off mountain in a daze. Straight Face dropped her head in response. Jihu also fell into deep thought. First, it was probably correct to assume that both the group of 4 and the group of 2 were participants of the banquet. Maybe. Straight Face spoke up. This mountain is Stage 1. What do you mean? Didn't Stage 1 end? The labyrinth might have been a sample, while this is the real thing. Wait. Snake Eyes pressed her temple as though her head was hurting. I'm not following what you're saying. You can't understand even after looking at them yourself? Shut up. So, you're saying that those idiots left the labyrinth before us and are continuing Stage 1? Exactly. It looks like they have to climb the stairs to the top, while killing the monsters that pop out, of course. Straight Face's analysis caused Snake Eyes to frown. Fine, let's assume you're right. Then why are we riding this? Just as Snake Eyes said, they were comfortably climbing the mountain with a moving platform, while participants in other mountains were climbing the stairs and fighting for their lives. Straight Face revealed her teeth with a grin. Who knows? If my conjecture is correct, we shouldn't go all the way up to the peak of the mountain either. Why? We are passing through the 6th pillar right now. We should be stopping at the 7th pillar. Straight Face leisurely looked around at the other party members and then pointed her finger at the pillar they just passed. Xiao Jihu nodded his head in agreement. Having heard her conjecture, he guessed how the Golden Commandment came back. It's not special treatment. Most likely, every group had left the labyrinth through the moving platform at the center, because that was the correct way of leaving the building. But not every group would have stopped at the same spot. The more people a group had when leaving the labyrinth, the closer to the top the platform would travel. The pillars were there to serve as checkpoints. What would have happened if Xiao Jihu left with just Maria? We would have been dropped off at the 2nd pillar and forced to climb the stairs just as painfully as the others. Xiao Jihu glanced at the white headband girl. She was making a suggestive smile. It's a bit of a shame, but it shouldn't take long to reach the peak from the 7th pillar. Straight Face stretched her neck side to side and prepared to hop off the platform. However, her estimate was not entirely correct. Contrary to their expectations, the platform they were riding on passed through the 7th pillar as well. When Xiao Jihu stared at her for an explanation, she scowled and burst out, What are you looking at? It's not our fault that that person died. A hollow voice rang out. When the quiet girl opened her mouth, the nearby gazes naturally fell on her. He was nearly dead when he entered. We couldn't heal him either, so it seems the banquet didn't count him in. The girl's suggestion made Lara exclaim in disbelief. No way, that means this place knows all about our situation. The feeble girl shrugged as if to say that was outside of her understanding. Snake Eyes muttered in response, You can talk. I for sure thought you were mute. That's rude. Das rude Tilda. Snake Eyes imitated the girl in a mocking tone. Well, we'll find out. Then she lied down on the platform like she had given up worrying about the matter. But she had to get up soon enough as they were closing in on the mountaintop. As expected, the 8th pillar was standing at the end of the staircase, or, in other words, the mountaintop. Soon, the platform stopped and descended until it touched the mountain. Are we first? Snake Eyes stepped on the ground joyously. How could she be anything but happy when she almost ended up climbing the mountain from the beginning? But just like the saying, even a jade has dirty spots, there was a team that arrived at the mountaintop first. That group consisted of 8 people. Clearly, everyone had survived. Damn, we're second. Snake Eyes grumbled as if someone spoiled her fun, but in truth, the order of arrival didn't matter. What mattered was that they got here. The team that arrived first also noticed them and slowly shortened the distance. Xiao Jihu studied the group to see if there was anyone he knew. At that moment, he noticed someone walking toward him from the other group. Hey, is that who I think it is? Maria noticed too. It was the high-rank priest that Kazuki invited. Who the hell is that dressed in nothing but black? Xiao Jihu smiled bitterly at Snake Eyes, mumbling. Just like before, the priest was hard to miss with her head covered by a hood and her body covered by a gown. Wow, I'm jealous. 1 man and 6 women, you must have been one happy camper. The man standing at the forefront of the group commented sarcastically. Happy? Happy my ass. Xiao Jihu cursed inwardly, especially when he remembered how much energy was sucked out of him in the labyrinth. But it's interesting. You only have 7 people, yet you flew all the way to the top. About that. While the man and Lara exchanged information, Xiao Jihu greeted the priest with courtesy. Hello. When did you get here? But the priest didn't say a word no matter how many times he tried to talk to her. I don't think she's trying to ignore me, though. From the way the priest glanced at him from top to bottom, Xiao Jihu guessed she was checking to see whether he was injured. Tap, tap. She even straightened the wrinkles on his clothes. It's fine. Seeing the priest act like a mother duck that just found her lost duckling, Sial Jihu felt himself feeling a little strange. Now is not the time to be doing this. The banquet wasn't over just because they reached the top. He couldn't just sit around and wait leisurely when Chohong and Hugo could be fighting for their lives. If I can just find out which direction they're coming up in, you can't help them. At that moment, just as Sial Jihu was about to move, Lara's voice struck his ears. Yes, the moment you step on the mountaintop, you are no longer allowed to interfere with anything happening on the stairs. The man explained slowly. We tried various methods. We couldn't go down, support others with long-ranged attacks, or even communicate with them in any way. According to her, the world between the mountaintop and the stairway has been separated. The man spoke as he looked at the priest spinning around Sial Jihu. She talked. When Sial Jihu turned and looked at the priest, she stopped and stared out to the far distance. Then we're stuck here. Pretty much, we have no choice but to wait for now. With the man's explanation finished, Sial Jihu glanced at the priest for confirmation. The priest turned her head and nodded slowly. In the end, Sial Jihu had no choice but to put down his spear. Stage 1 had ended. Sial Jihu's party naturally split up. Although he knew there was no reason for them to cooperate anymore, he was still left with a bitter taste in his mouth. Lara and Sophie expressed their gratitude. Snake Eyes left to take a look around the mountaintop, and the white headband girl disappeared without a word. Maria sat down under a tree, saying she wanted to rest. As for Straight Face, "What's your name?" She struck up a conversation before leaving. Sial, 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 Sial. After repeating the name a couple of times, Straight Face's eyebrows went up. From Haramark? Yes, it could have been a misunderstanding, but for the first time she genuinely seemed surprised. So you're that. After nodding her head a couple of times, she smiled and put a cigarette in her mouth. Is old man doing well? Excuse me? No, it's nothing. Anyways, you weren't half bad. Well, I didn't like that you dragged those useless bitches with us, but looking down at the rest of the contenders from here isn't all that bad. Straight Face's snickering sent cold sweat down his back. Perhaps this woman was a natural sadist. She was only missing a black leather suit and a whip. But her skills are top-notch. Her quick draw, which was invisible to the naked eye, was still etched in his mind. She certainly had skills befitting a high ranker. Moreover, she was from the same area and was colorless, unlike Snake Eyes. Getting to know her didn't seem like such a terrible idea. What's your name? Don't you know it's rude to ask a lady her name so casually? Straight Face showed her unique, arrogant face. When Sial Jihu reacted with a shocked face, she shook her hands, saying it was a joke. It's Rahi. That's a pretty name. He didn't add the follow-up, unlike how you act comment. Straight Face shook her head. No, it's Rahi. What about your last name? You didn't say yours either. Sial Jihu laughed. You're calculative in weird places. Oh, you're already complaining. Straight Face dropped the cigarette, pushed her bangs up, and spat on the ground graciously. Getting my phone number is going to be harder. With that, she turned around and left with a final comment. Good luck finding out, but I already know. As he watched the woman, Rahi, walk away, Sial Jihu stuck out his tongue. There was nothing on the mountaintop. As Sial Jihu wandered until the end of Stage 1, praying for his teammates' safe return, more and more teams began to reach the mountaintop. After watching quietly for a while, Sial Jihu noticed that no teams arrived with all 8 members except the first. He saw one team reach the top with 7 members, but most teams had only 3 to 5 members. Thankfully, Chohong and Hugo performed as expected. Chohong was the first to reach the top, and her team consisted of 5 members. Apparently, their team had 6 members when they left the labyrinth, but one had died during the climb. Are you okay? Sial Jihu asked as he watched the exhausted Chohong. I thought I'd die. Really? Chohong heaved out heavy breaths and plopped down on the ground. She didn't have any serious injuries, but her mace was stained with blood and her hair was dyed silver. Since she was forced to use manifestation, Sial Jihu could guess how difficult her journey must have been. But you look fine. Why are you brimming with energy? I had good luck with the team, Sial Jihu lied. Fuck, I'm jealous. I met complete shit-stains. Cho-hong growled and glared to the side, and her teammates instantly flinched. Idiots who are all talk with no skills. You don't know how many times I held myself back from killing them. Cho-hong's chilling tone showed how much stress she had to endure. On the other hand, Seol-jihu guessed that every team had similar problems, as one man from Cho-hong's team was glaring at her with resentment, even though he couldn't say a word in front of her. Hugo wasn't looking any better either. He arrived with 2 others. Apparently, he left the labyrinth with 4 others, with 2 dying in the process. Listening to Cho-hong and Hugo's stories, Seol-jihu felt like he was listening to a fairy tale. It was only now that he understood how great of a reward it was to pass the stairs automatically. Although he wanted to listen to Hugo's story in more detail, Hugo had incurred heavy injuries, so they had to go look for Maria immediately. Thankfully, they found a priest nearby healing injured earthlings. With that, members of the Carp team had all passed the first stage. But not all of their companions were present. Seeing people climbing the stairs intermittently, Seol-jihu finally sat his butt on the ground. Several hours had passed since Seol-jihu first reached the mountaintop, but stage 1 was showing no signs of an end. Just when Seol-jihu thought it was over, 2 or 3 people would show up at the mountaintop. The only difference was that none of the latecomers had more than 3 members. Since Seol-jihu couldn't just wait day and night, he took the time for a brief self-reflection. 50 points. That was the score he gave himself for stage 1. He couldn't be more generous than that. The result was good, there was no doubt about it. But the process was worth 0 points. Not once had the 7 of them worked together. Of course, one could argue that taking turns to open the door was more efficient, but that was just pure coincidence. Seol-jihu could only patch the twisted relationships, not mend them. To be honest, Seol-jihu thought he was more of a mediator than a leader. He appeased his teammates with words and kept them together, but could he honestly say he led them? Here you are. Seol-jihu was smoking to alleviate the stifling feeling in his heart when a shadow approached him with a familiar voice. Mr. Kazuki? Amen. When did you get here? An hour ago. Can you give me one too? Kazuki sat down next to him. Seol-jihu was surprised Kazuki was here as he handed him a cigarette. I didn't know. I was busy trying to find out something. Kazuki pointed at the cigarette in his mouth. When Seol-jihu lit it for him, Kazuki took a deep breath and exhaled just as deeply. I didn't know you were a smoker. Only when shitty things happen. It was the first time Seol-jihu saw Kazuki use coarse language. Examining him more closely, he could see that Kazuki looked exhausted. It must have been hard. It felt like the limits of my patience were being tested. With that, Kazuki smoked the cigarette silently. He seemed to be venting his anger, so Seol-jihu sensibly didn't dig into it. Seol. It wasn't until the cigarette burned to the filter that Kazuki opened his mouth again. There's something I want to say. He sounded quite serious.